Oh, and when he came back, everybody was like, "Oh, is he going to be good enough?" And I was like, "Of course he will. He's NQ." And to be fair, he has been good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that this has been a situation where like, oh, he needs to go because he's underperforming. I think he's done very, very well. So it's a little weird to see him decide, but he was talking in tweets to Hindu Man, and it seems to be more about other shit in his life than anything else.
And that's understandable. I mean, people have left teams for real life before, and you gotta respect it because this isn't the LCS. Like, it doesn't pay that well, and if you gotta do real life things, you gotta do real life things.
So I mean, like, you know, I don't know if he's still in medical school or whatnot, but he's got other things on his plate. He's got other shit going on. So I wish him luck, and that sucks. I'd love to watch him play. NQ is one of the original dudes that got me interested in Smite. That whole like European solo scene, sort of going back and forth between himself and Zelia and Game Hunter during the path to 200K.
It was crucial. It was so cool.
It really was, and I mean that's a big deal because the person taking his spot will be
his nemesis. It's Game Hunter. And that's really cool. Especially because those Spicy Waffles and Night's Watch were the two teams that played against each other in relegations. And like, honestly, I feel like this could have happened sooner and just sort of like smushing those two teams together, which had some really good names on it. So yeah, it's going to be Game Hunter in the solo lane, Ninja Boba in the jungle to replace Zindern. And Zindern's a player that like, he just has not really performed.
Right, and that's objectively been the story of Zindern. Zindern has joined, like, you know, and with the recent, like, nonsense of drama or whatever, I feel the need to, like, qualify things that I haven't qualified in the past or whatnot. But, like, I'm not throwing rocks at him or anything, but Zindern we've seen him with Team Coach, we've seen him with a couple of Challenger Cup teams. Zindern routinely, like, joins a team, and he doesn't destroy it. I'm not saying he's a team destroyer or anything, but he comes on and joins the big stage, and, you know, we haven't seen what we sort of want to or expected. Everybody talks about
it just doesn't really work.
Show up. Right, yeah.
Like,
from this spot, I can't really tell why.
Yeah, it's just sort of like you have Agilitas, now Titan, right? And Zindern was on that team, and it didn't really work. And then he left, and it did. And then he joins Coast, and that didn't really work. And now the Night's Watch didn't really work. And I just want to see these guys succeed, but it's not happening for whatever reason.
Exactly. And I mean, you know, it's just, it's very, very strange. Zindern did not come to me as a surprise. As I said, we've seen him join teams come and go for whatever the reason.
He had a lot of trouble. I mean, in the first 4 games, he went something like 3 kills, 29 deaths. Like, that's not saying he's bad. That's saying bad shit happened to him.
Exactly. And at some points, like, it's been in those early games, the jungle was the reason the team lost. Not meaning Zindern the individual. Maybe it was lack of support from other team members, whatever. The deaths of the jungle wound up being the win condition for the enemy team. So again, it's less the story of like Zindern sucks, who told you so, but it's more the story of like, there was a problem with the jungle, and it was Zindern's position that was the cause for some of these early losses for the team. So it's an interesting spot.
And that's not even dancing around the issue. That's just like something weird is happening, and it involves Zindern and the jungle. But like you can't pinpoint it, so you're not gonna be like, yeah, Zindern's fucking up. I just don't know how.
Exactly, because I mean, like, trust me, I am more than willing to call things as they are. It's just in this situation, it's not so easy. And that's sort of the Night's Watch in a nutshell. You look at this roster, and, you know, Adonis has a boner for Moex for good reason.
He's so good.
And I have a boner for NQ for good reason. He's a great solo laner, and a lot of the fans have boners for
I got a boner for Carreño. Like, he is, like, such a role player.
And then they just lose and lose and lose and lose and lose and lose and lose, and you're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Like, something is wrong here.
Yeah.
But I can't quite figure it out. So, and sometimes that something is wrong is just not on the page. Sometimes it's the feel of a team.
Sure.
And that has a lot to do with things. I mean, you could take examples from professional sports with the Heat. For those that don't follow basketball, they had the 3 OP characters in the league, and they only won 1 championship. They were supposed to win a bazillion. You could look at like League of Legends teams. You know, they like Faker's team had a whole bunch of great players on it, and they didn't do as well as people wanted them to. And you can look at, you know, even teams here in Smite, exactly what we're talking about with the Night's Watch. Sometimes it just doesn't work out with an all-star team, because there's more to winning games than just being the best at your position.
Sure.
You know?
And just to... NQ did say in chat, I felt like my life is drifting away from me as I sit in front of the PC playing Smite all the time, so I concentrate on real life now. Still support Nox and love them, and he is still in medical school. Like, that's a good-ass reason to leave a team, dude. Like, that's the way to do it. It obviously sucks that it didn't work out, but, like, you cannot hold it against him.
Exactly. It's no. That's something that I'll never do. Same thing with Nantan. Nantan and I don't always see eye to eye, but when I agree with the man, I totally agree with the man. And one of the things that I've definitely agreed on was when he was sort of trying to figure things out. I'm not even sure if he plays for High Five right now, admittedly.
I believe he does.
Yeah, so he like quit Thirst sort of at like an inopportune time.
Like after week 1.
Yeah, because he's like, dude, I'm in like a top 10 school or anything. So
he's Notre Dame is like very good. Right? They have the best philosophy department in the country, dude. I'm so jealous.
Shut up, philosophy, man. He's like, dude, I'm a math major at a really dope school. I'm sorry. P.S. I like amusing Cobb, right? Like that's Nantan, and you have to respect that. Like it doesn't, you know, that sort of thing. I will never, because esports in general and. A lot of people get caught up in the fact, and we're sort of jumping around, but we're going to stick to the roster mania. But like a lot of people get caught up in the fact of like what SPL players make and how hard it is to make a living. But like that's esports minus LCS. Like it is a gamble is the wrong term, but it's a tough investment in a probable future. It's becoming more and more probable, but it's, like I said, I'm not going to call it a dice roll or a coin flip, but it's by no means a here's my resume, let's ready, set, go, I'm going to make money now. Yeah. So it's tough. So I'll always respect people that decide that it's not for them, a la Non-Tomolo, now he's back, and NQ, and, you know, in a perfect world, I'd get to see NQ play solo lane again, but in a more perfect world, NQ can feed himself.
That I hope he can. I hope he can afford plenty of trips to Waffle House. One of the funniest points of the launch tournament. The launch tournament was the first like international event where they flew out players, and meeting all of you guys was amazing. One of the best parts was just them experiencing Waffle House for the first time, especially NQ, who just... He had the flirtiest relationship with this Waffle House waitress, and it was absolutely amazing. Best thing I've ever seen.
The best thing was when NQ thought the free refills was because she was attracted to him, when in actuality, that's just...
You just get free refills. Yeah.
He was like, Elizabeth. That's how much he said her name. I remember it to this day. Almost 2 years later. He was like... She just came by. She was like, more Coca-Cola, whatever he was drinking. He was like, for me? Yes, Elizabeth. Yes, please. And then she leaves, and he goes, oh my God, like she's hooking me up, and we're just like, you got a free refill on a fountain soda, dude. Like, it was adorable. Yeah. And then. The way NQ tipped the Waffle House waitress, because tipping was also strange to them. NQ tipped her like this on the table. He actually made the money rain. So it was an interesting experience, to say the least, for us with NQ at the launch tournament. Like I said, I mean, you know, I wish you luck, but God damn it, come back, NQ.
Yeah, exactly. But so that's one reason teams make roster changes, right? Just like a player's just like, I don't want to do, not even don't want, but like Like, because don't want implies that, like, you're not enjoying yourself or whatever, but it's any sort of reason where you're like, this isn't for me.
Right. I mean, we saw even KO, right? Old Smite player, just like was one of those people like spray on that just
he was on BLG, and then he went to Curse, and then he went to Snipe, and eventually he was just like,
poof.
This, I'm just not. He just sort of like was like, I'm not gonna hop to the next team. You know, I'm just gonna let it be. And then he hopped to Heroes of the Storm, and now he's on Tempo Storm and living in a team house, and he fucking KO, man. It's hilarious.
And we'll see what happens. Heroes of the Storm is interesting, but I wish him luck. I never actually, knew him closely.
KO's a cool guy. He's a nice guy. I used to lane with him, dude.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that lane must have sucked.
Yeah. No, we were both very
Storm player and a coach.
Yeah, we were both very passive. I just sort of waited for the enemy to fall asleep, and then eventually we hit late game. It was great.
So, you were the inspiration for Young Bae.
No, Young Bae was already doing that.
Okay.
Young Bae has been doing that forever.
People move around a little bit, and just on their own accord. And then there's also like
what was it? Was it Young Bae and Badja, I think, that laned together? Or was it Smek and Badja?
It was Smek and Badja.
It was Smek and Badja, and it was Young Bae Zalia, I believe.
Yep.
No, wait, no.
I don't know about Young Bae Zalia, but I do remember Smek Badja.
Wait, I think I'm conflating two teams. Yeah, Wait, okay. Because you had the Spoo Hierarch lane, and then you had the Young Bae... Yeah, it must have been Young Bae Badja. Because Spoo and Hierarch were in a lane, and then you had Lobster in mid. Yeah, so it was Young Bae Badja. They laned together.
Yep. And then you just have Lobster playing Agni. Things sure change, huh?
Things sure change.
Passive Young Bae, Lobster and Agni mid. Wow, the game is so much different. But on things that are different, like we said, roster changes come from a lot of different places. And one of those places is sometimes things just... It sounds like a platitude, and when you read it, and actually, when I, as a fan of pro sports, would read, I don't know how many times, J.R. Smith was a great player. We respect him and wish him luck, but he just wasn't a fit for the New York Knicks. When I hear that soundbite, I, used to groan. Because, as a fan, it's like, all right, what's the gossip? What's the drama?
Sure.
Whose sister did he sleep with? What don't I know? But being closer to these situations of being involved in the SPL, it's actually just how that works.
Yeah, kind of. Right? Now there might be a variety of reasons that you would do that. I think my favorite example, because it's hilarious, is when C9 replaced Half Devil. Half Devil played so well, but C9 was like, listen, we're going to replace him. And everyone's like, why, dude? He's so good. And they're like, because we don't like him.
Yeah, and Half Devil is a awesome dude. You heard him when he subbed, what was it, week 3? He subbed for an SPL team. He played very well. The Hi-Rez Studios invited him on for an interview, and very talkative dude, very, very, very into it. But just that isn't for everybody. Now, I would love to play with Half Devil.
Yeah.
Some people just aren't built for it. I mean, you have the Half Devil example. I always go the DJ Pernicus route.
Sure.
So sort of the opposite, right? It's not the story of DJ Pernicus getting kicked off of teams. It's the story of DJ Pernicus's teams never working out. He's always been, he's had, going back to Slam Jam City, down to Frag.
Yo, let's go all the way back to Backfire, where he laned with Eonic.
Jeez Louise. Yeah. Right? And largely the story has been oversimplified to DJ Pernicus is BM or an asshole or rough around the edges. That's usually the one I go with.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work for a multitude of reasons. And I said for a long time, and Krett, you can back me up on this.
I'm sure I will disagree with you.
I said for a long time, I was like, look, DJ is a great player, and he's not that big of an asshole. He's just more rough than a lot of the PC community is. Once he finds those people to mesh with and vibe with, his team is going to be scary. And I think that's what
I've never heard you say that.
I hate you. I think that's what we finally have with Legion, where Adoro is that guy. Adoro is he's from I think he was to Florida State. He's just a cool rough around the edges dude, not so, I don't want to call everybody soft, but there's definitely a different element there, and Pain Devion is quite the opposite, which balances it out. And so he sort of like finally found the spot. And that's a lot of what we're talking about here. You need to have that sort of other connection outside of just like, well, we're both good at the game. Because sometimes that's not enough. I mean, dude, I was a huge Aurora fan, but like that dynamic just didn't work for you guys, right?
So, I mean, I just want to read his tweet longer. Because I think this is part of the conversation. I would like to everyone know that I stepped down from Eager, so it was his decision. It was not a good fit for me. Very short, but there you go. And then here's like the PR part. Eager's a great team. I enjoyed my time with them. I wish them luck. They're great guys. Poor Bear Mike is a great replacement. Go Eager. Like, cool, man. Like, so then people are like, it was not a good fit for me. What does that mean?
Right, and I mean, like, that could mean a number of things.
Sure.
Like, I mean, in, you know, just, I mean, shit, I remember working with, so, I mean, like, you and I have been the go-to caster combo going back to, like,
you're not a good fit first for me.
Started. You're not a good fit for me. But, you weren't the first person I casted with. I had casted with a gentleman named Nietzsche.
Yep.
Going way back in the day.
Long time ago.
I had casted with a couple of other dudes. I casted with a gentleman named Tiger Rider, which, unlike Nietzsche, is relevant. He is a multi-game streamer that like actually does real well. He's on main menu team with some other dudes.
Oh, cool.
But like, so Tiger Rider is probably a better example because Nietzsche like didn't work out because he was kind of a dirtbag. But like Tiger Rider, we just didn't match. Like he made music references that I like. Death Cab for Cutie is pretty cool. But, like, we just didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things, and that doesn't necessarily mean things in common. I mean, Krett, you and I are very different, and, like, we work together real well. It's just there's sometimes there's, like, an intangible. Hate you. Exactly my point. And so, like, sometimes there's, like, this intangible, and then you finally just land on it. And we work out. Here we are, like, 2 years later doing a talk show.
All right, listen, it's not been that long. It's a year and 3 months. Since launch. It's a year and 3 months since launch.
And we were working before launch.
Well, that was 3 months. Because tryout, it was January, yeah. It was January. I did my first cast on Smite Game January 18th.
I did my first cast on Smite Game January 6th.
There you go. All right. Sweet.
At 8:30 p.m. after Fats.
All right. Yeah, so...
So, all right, so it's been...
But okay, so I want to talk a little bit about what like was not a good fit for me means, because it could mean many things, right? And it's important to remember a few things about professional players. Professional play is very difficult. It is a job. It is a job in which you're directly competing against other people who do that job. It's also a job where you're basically the best, or like in the list of people who are the best, right? There's 40 people, 40 starting players in the North American SPL. Yeah. 40 starting players in the North American SPL. 8 teams, 5 players. 40 starting players in the North American SPL. And they're all like, you could put them on a list and they'd probably be in like the top 5 for that, or the top 10 for that role.
There are 8 teams in the SPL and 5 players on each team, so there's 40 starters.
Thank you.
No problem.
See, this is why we get along, because he does the math and I do the talking.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's 40 starters, but like if you made a top 10 of each role per region, you'd probably see all of the starters on that list for their respective roles. Everyone's really good. You're competing against each other. That's your job. And that's very stressful. That's why we've seen some people not want to do it. That's why we've seen some people leave. That's why we've seen some people flourish and some people fail. But also, some people get along normally, but in those stressful situations, they just don't.
Yeah, and I mean it's also rough because it's also like a competition between you and your teammates of publicity and stuff like that. You know, everybody needs to do other things to supplement their income.
Totally.
And, like, there could be jealousy issues, you know, and things like that. And there's just
trust. You have to completely trust your teammates, both in and out of game.
There are so many variables, and when the players are separated by such, for the most part, such small varying degrees of talent, like, you know, you have these superstars, but out of the 40 players in the SPL, I'd say 30 of them, the top 30 of those 40 players, are very, very, very close in talent. I think that some of the less talented players are probably more obvious, and some of the higher talented players are more obvious. But that chunk in the middle, they are separated by a splinter of hair. So when you're sitting there like trying to like vie for competitive viability and viewers on the stream, and like sometimes you need a bro, and that bro's not always there. I mean, you guys work jobs at home, and it's very simple. It's very similar where, like, you know, especially like in high pressure things like sales or whatnot, as much as you need to compete with your friends, you need to rely on your friends, and sometimes you need to talk to your friends, and whether or not they're your friends are actually there is a different story. So it's very tough, especially when you guys are doing what you guys are doing with Eager, and like have taken that next step to go from like, well, we're a MOBA Smite team and we get paychecks, to like, this is our family, it's a brand, it's an investment in our future. Like, that sort of thing requires a whole second level, you know? So
yeah, and like, well, the other thing is you have to learn how to tolerate each other, how to be friends with each other, how to trust each other. You have to know what you're doing. Like, when Dare starts to drink, I just lock my door. And if I forget to lock my door, I just give him Reese's Pieces, and he goes away.
Just give him Reese's, and do you also have cheese balls on deck?
No, I actually ate them all.
Oh, well, that's absolutely disgusting and surprising.
I know. Yeah.
They have a flavor. How do you enjoy it?
Fake cheese is not a flavor. It's not even real cheese.
I'm going to make you eat Cheese Whiz next time we hang out.
No, I don't want to do that.
You're close.
Yeah, it's like a 2-hour flight. Or 1 hour flight.
Yeah, it's going to be like an hour or less to fly. It's not that long to drive.
It's like an 8-hour drive.
Wait, where are you in Florida?
Near Tampa.
Ew. So let's go Lightning. Are you rooting for the Lightning?
No.
You and the other 7 people.
I don't know what a Lightning is.
Tampa Bay Lightning are the NHL team that has made it to the finals and nobody likes them.
Who? What are we even talking about?
See, exactly. You don't always need to have things in common.
That's true.
For a partnership or a team to work, there's a lot of, and I know I use this word a lot, but I swear to God I only use it when it's applicable, intangibles really there.
No, you use that more than when it's applicable.
No,
it can't be applicable in that many situations.
It really is.
You use it in every sentence.
Well, I mean,
every sentence you have ever said, you say intangible.
It's an intangible reason that I use.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
But I mean, seriously, like, that's what this whole conversation is about. Is like, it is unfortunately just covered in intangibles. Nox is a team that on paper should work, but they didn't because of a variable that cannot be quantified. Unquantifiable.
You're so proud of yourself. Did you just like Google thesaurus.com really quick?
No, but I had to get a different pen because I threw mine on the floor and I didn't want to bend down.
Nice. I do have a pen. It's so, like, why do you own pens, man? What do you write on?
I have many pens. What I write on, I'm a notebook guy, dude. I'm trying to buy like an 11-inch portable, because the thing is, I like just being able to be like, boom, here are my thoughts or notes. Or whatever,
yeah.
And
I
like
can see that.
A laptop or something, like, that's rough. I actually had a dream last night about a game, and I wrote it down here. See, like, you could punch this. These are stairs. I was Hercules, and you like punch through the wall and like pick up the pineapple. I don't know. It kind of made me think of Donkey Kong, but that. So team synergy can be very difficult to really just put down and figure out.
Because partially, you just have to tolerate the insanity of your teammates. Everyone is weird, man. Like, even the people who are normal are weirdly normal. Anatoly is like the most laid-back dude I have ever met, and I am the most laid-back dude I've ever met. Right? But like, so you just sort of go with it, and you just give people the benefit of the doubt and stuff, and sometimes it doesn't work, man. Sometimes you don't adjust fast enough, or you get into a stressful situation before you've really, like, figured out how you mesh with somebody, and there could be a lot of different reasons for someone not fitting in a team.
Right, and you know, when you think about like famous pairings, I mean, like I said, on the surface, you and I are very different. Sure, deep down, we are actually very similar.
And we're famous.
I was actually thinking about qualifying that before I said us. But I mean, you think about like Penn and Teller. Teller is a loud, obnoxious fat dude, and Penn literally doesn't talk, right?
He actually has talked. There is YouTube video of him talking.
You know, like that exists. I mean, you look at sports people, not the characters, but you know, some of the talk show hosts, and very similar stuff. Like they're not very similar on the surface, but there are other things, and that's what makes. And when you have a team dynamic,
and there's Siegfried and Roy. Siegfried and Roy. I don't know what they did.
You have Godzilla and Godzuki, Scooby and Scrappy. You've got a whole bunch of these people that are very similar.
You also have Scooby and Shaggy, which is a little bit weird.
Scooby and Shaggy is probably better than Scooby and Scrappy. Scrappy's a little piece of shit, but he's a dog, so he's allowed. Yeah, I knew I got that wrong, OB3000. I was hoping nobody would call me out, but you did! Like, as soon as I said it, I was like, shit, Teller's the silent one. Nobody's going to call me out on it, though, because it's a room full of nerds. Well, 10 points to you, OB3000. You called him out. But
wait,
like,
why would nerds not like Penn and Teller?
Nerds would actually probably really like Penn and Teller.
Yeah,
I was hoping that nobody would call me out on it, so thanks a lot, man.
Dude, got you. Anytime.
We've got a motif going here. I'm going to keep saying things that I hope nobody calls me out on. Krett sucks. So.
Oh, man, that's not true. And I can prove it.
But, you know, especially when there's something like business or fucking sports or esports in this sense, it's very, very cool. And I just messed that up. I said sports or esports, and we're going off script here, Krett, because did you see what I retweeted from Slasher earlier?
No, I totally didn't. I was streaming all day.
Word. First of all, I've noticed that you've been streaming a little bit more. That's pretty sweet. Second of all, Slasher.
Wait. Let me plug myself really quick.
Yeah, go for it.
So I've been doing this AMA for a while. This was week 29, but I wrote week 28 because I'm an idiot. And this idiot will answer your questions on his AMA for Smite Math, Theory Crafting, whatever. But I'll also do it on stream, which is really cool. You should come check it out. Blah, 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 blah. All right, go.
In all honesty, it's actually
Twitch.tv/Kretuhtuh.
I don't actually watch, but I open the window so you get a viewer. So
thank you, dude.
I think about that shit. But anyway, Slasher tweeted today, and I'm sure other people did. Slasher's just the guy that I saw, so he's the one that I'm going to link to. He tweeted the very next issue of ESPN the magazine will have esports in it. So
cool.
It features Marshawn Lynch, the football player, and it's like the draw is Marshawn Lynch is going to be in the next Call of Duty. Hooray! And like from the surface, it's ESPN. You'll see it right there in that tweet. The esports issue, right? And it has Marshawn Lynch on the cover, and you're like, who gives a shit? And one of the first things it says is 37 million people revere gaming phenomenon PewDiePie, and all of you roll your eyes in tandem with myself saying like, oh, it's another one that's going to completely miss the mark. But what's actually really cool is the next one is 32 million people watch Faker rule League of Legends, and they have an in-depth or supposedly in-depth spread interview with Faker, one of the most famous League of Legends players in the world. And then they say 89 million rate as esports fanatics, and they actually talk through who's it called? 538, which is a cool organization that does a lot of like stats and stuff from traditional sports and politics, etc. They've sort of expanded to esports, so they include stuff from 538. They have some stuff on Faker, and it's going to get a spot on SportsCenter. So it's actually really cool. There's a lot of like pandering to the non-esports crowd, like PewDiePie gets a bazillion numbers. Look how big these numbers are, and here's a football player in Call of Duty. But they're also doing the realness, which to me says there's somebody there that's like, esports, and the marketing guy is like Marshawn Lynch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. Like, so somebody has Faker he's a mid laner in League of Legends. He is one of the bigger regarded players in Asia, and just one of the bigger focal points of esports from the outside looking in. So it's really, really cool to see this sort of growth, and hopefully it helps more because, I mean, David Fry put out a document recently talking about sustainability in esports, and it was sort of...
Yo, let me stop you real quick.
Sure.
Can we just talk about really quick? Actually, not talk about. Just revere how smooth of a transition that was, and how much I fucked it up. All right, as you are.
So I mean, like, David Fry wrote this document that I'm sure you all have seen. It's a little all over the place, but it's about sustainability in esports. And one of the things he touches on, which I don't think which is interesting, is LCS is like a league, and it's the only league really in esports where one can say, like, yeah, I'm an LCS player, and like not be afraid of their income. Afraid is probably a harsh word. Like, I'm sure you guys in the Eager House aren't sitting there, like, biting your nails, like, saving literal pennies to pay your next paycheck. But a lot of esports players...
But
like,
that's also, like, because we do other things.
Right. And, I mean, that's the big point, is that while esports professionals aren't, like, saving their literal pennies, a lot of them live... virtually paycheck to paycheck. The term paycheck to paycheck might not apply literally because it's not a paycheck every 1st and 15th, but it's sometimes a tough living, so you have to do other things unless you're LCS. So seeing this sort of coverage, Krett, I mean, I get really excited because I hope to see it spread through at least a couple of games. I'm not saying that pro Ricochet players should be able to buy Porsches, but like, let's see some more growth, you know?
Yeah, I mean, well, the other thing to remember that when you're talking about LCS players is they're living in a team house, which I assume they don't have to pay rent to because that's part of probably the salary of their or like, not really salary, but like part of what their organization is providing.
Right.
Which is also really cool. So like what they make goes a little bit further because they're not paying rent, and rent is kind of expensive.
Depending on where you're at.
Yeah.
And especially
when you live near like a studio, which for the LCS is
Bay Area.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, it's ridiculously expensive. We're talking like New York prices. You know, I moved down to Atlanta because as a 20-something, I wouldn't be able to live in New York, frankly. But here I am, you know, and so there's a lot of things that make that tough. But one of the things that everybody talks about sustainability and such, and I see some people in chat. I want esports to grow large, but at the same time, I don't want ESPN to taint it. That feels rough to me, and I'll tell you why. I'm not wearing eyeliner and just have beautiful eyes. What's it called? I came from the punk scene, from the hardcore scene, and a lot of this, as a musician and watching these musicians, a lot of this, like, I mean, you sort of recognize that scene being the Northeast. How many times did you hear bands be like, "Don't be a sellout"?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. NoFX is the only DIY punk band that like actually did it. You know how many, like, for every NoFX, I can show you like thousands, tens of thousands of kids with Liberty spikes that like either are crust punks and live under a bridge, or now buy their clothes from like Vineyard Vines and like do math for a living in corporate America, right? Like selling out.
Yep, that is the most Connecticut thing you could possibly do, to be honest.
Right? So like,
especially like when you
like that brand drop, were you
I do like the brand drop, and I also like the fact that just like the Connecticut punk scene, at least, which is fairly strong, but it's also the kind of punk scene where they're like, hardcore is not hardcore enough. We need to make other things core. There was this kid, and this is not a political statement, but no, he was into gaycore.
Yep.
And like, dude, whatever, but yeah. I mean, and he probably works at Vineyard Vines now.
Yeah, they actually call them like gypsy core. Like there's, you know,
there's a lot of cores. Apple core.
So I mean, like, selling out esports is, I mean, the FGC, it's funny because we talk about esports, the ESPNification of esports, right? What are they going to take away from us? And then we turn around, using a royal we're not all the same, but then we turn around and look at how hard the FGC fights esports and laugh.
Yeah.
Right? And it's kind of silly because being on
especially when like Fatal 8, right? I feel like the FGC was like, this is too esports, and then they watched it, they're like, this is dope.
Yeah.
Except for like that awful ceremony in the middle. That was awful.
The Fatal 8 was a show, and professional sports is a show. I mean, the large part of the reason I like a lot of the pro sports I like is because of the story, is because there's a storyline with characters, and it's fun to see the baby-faced homegrown players of Golden State go against the money of LeBron James and watching him go back to his hometown. That shit's all cool. That's nice. It supplements the competition. But then there's also WWE, and that's really what the Fatal 8 was, right? Like the Fatal 8 was the launch tournament essentially for Mortal Kombat, and like, that's a lot different than the Capcom Pro Tour. So
yeah, very much. It was much more produced than the Capcom Pro Tour, but it wasn't scripted. They just were like, play the game, here you go.
Right.
Like it was just a tournament. It was just a tournament that was like, look at this new game and buy it.
Yeah. It was a little over the top.
It was a tournament trying to sell you something.
Yeah.
Whereas most tournaments are just tournaments.
Right. And I mean,
trying to sell you Red Bull and Mad Cat controllers.
And there's a happy medium, which I think the LCS and the SPL really land, where there's total showmanship, like there's no bones about it. The schedule the schedule is not made with storylines in mind, but it's really cool to look at the schedule and be like, Cloud9 versus AFK is the last game of the season, holy shit. And then you're on a team. We clearly don't tamper with the games, but when that last game of the season was the top two teams and one team's going to LAN, that's cool as hell. Don't fight that, right? You said, like I said, you don't cook it up like WWE, but when that shit happens, you sit there and you're like, excellent.
No, I think we need to switch the system to a best of 7, and if the loser's sad, it's replayed.
Shout out to Jasmine, one of my favorite tweets of all time.
Yo, did you see his new novelty account? He's the guy running the Smite design team Twitter, which is so good.
Some of it's really good. Some of it's like, eh.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think right now he's just sort of canvassing and just tweeting everything. But he said some really funny ones. Like, my favorite was, the cost of chin size has been reduced from 3050 to 3045. This is an incremental cost reduction, and we're going to monitor it closely to see how it performs. Like, they're just going to reduce the cost of chin size by 5 gold every patch.
Yep. And you want to know what, Krett?
Not a bad idea.
That's actually a really good idea.
Yeah, it is a good idea.
It actually sounds like a good idea. That's how I take a shower. Or put it on really hot, and I go in, and I just scald myself. And I slowly turn it down until I, am comfortable. And then I come out like the color red. So
that's what I do instead of getting a tan.
So it would be funny, but yeah, coming back to the main point, I'm just super happy about the ESPN coverage of esports. Colin Cowherd actually got a lot of bullshit. I gotta say, I really like Colin Cowherd, and his take on esports is normally why I like him, although this time he was ignorant. He's basically like, I don't like esports, I like sports, fuck you. And that's kind of why I like him, because he ruffles feathers and stuff. But Colin sort of went into it, was like, it's video games. I don't need to see anybody play Donkey Kong locked in their mother's basement. He was just very uninformed, and that's why he got shit on. And I think that a lot of people in the nerd community are unfortunately equating Colin Cowherd's stance to the big picture stance of people.
And there are certainly people who share his opinion, but they're equal levels of fuckboy.
Right, exactly. And like I said, a lot of them are fuckboys, and Colin Cowherd is a fuckboy. I just happen to like him because of it. That's part of the draw.
I like plenty of fuckboys. We're friends.
Knew that one was coming.
You know his name is actually Hi-Rez Fuckboy?
Knew that one was coming too, actually.
Actually, it's F.Fuckboy. Or F.Uckboy.
during the Heroes of the Dorm stuff when it was on ESPN2, if you searched Heroes of the Dorm or whatever hashtag they were using, of the ESPN people, of the pro players, there were some dissenters like Colin Cowherd, but more often than not, the general consensus was, I have no idea what's going on my screen, but the level of professionalism is keeping me here. Not the level of professionalism verbatim, but like the fact, and they didn't know their names, but the fact that Tasteless and Artosis just sound like good casters. The fact that people wanted to be broadcasters for esports is like blew a lot of people's minds. I mean, Michelle Beadle is like very much the pop culture girl when it comes to esports. When it comes to ESPN, she does a show called Sports Nation, which is like cheers and jeers instead of like 37.5 inches off the mark, right? Like it's more about the funds and everything else. And she was just like impressed with the amount of like just the type of ecosystem esports has built without the support of something like this. I mean, it's always fun to have a conversation, and it's always the conversation in the Uber. What do you do, right? And I think I had the conversation with my buddy's father, who I married my friend Ryan, and he basically asked
that's
me in
wonderful!
No
Congratulations!
Terms, yeah, ha 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 ha. He actually asked me in no uncertain terms why the hell you qualified. Right? And I was like, well, I kind of talk for a living about esports. And he was like, fuck is that? And I was like, well, it's a multi-million-dollar industry. Like, it's a huge deal.
I mean, I think video, like, esports is a multi-million-dollar industry if you attach the revenue come from gems and RP and whatever Dota does to make money.
Oh, well, when I say I mean, no. Esports is definitely multi-million-dollar industry. When it comes to,
true.
Twitch
I'm also forgetting that everything
average,
is multi-million-dollar right now.
Right, like Twitch viewers. Esports.
Yeah, Twitch. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna. I'm not gay. I did not marry my friend Ryan. My friend Ryan got married to a wonderful woman named Jessica, and I performed the wedding.
But was it a gay wedding?
No, I'm gonna hit that real quick.
But could it have been legally?
Yes,
that's wonderful. Congratulations.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, clearly, esports is a multi-million... What I'm trying to say here is that there's a bazillion dollars in esports.
Yeah.
Amazon bought Twitch for $970 million, and a large part of that, if not all of that, had to do with esports. And not a single cab driver that I've driven with knows what the fuck it is. Not a single one of my friends' parents know. Half of... Like, the majority of friends that I left in New York before I moved here thought I was faking it. Like, they thought I was like, sorry, can't chill on Friday night. I gotta watch game tape because I'm casting on Saturday, so that I could instead stay and, like, play World of Warcraft. Like, people don't know this world exists, and there's millions of dollars in it without ESPN.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what this world is going to be like once ESPN or whoever the fuck sports network gets involved and puts esports on the front page? Like, that's incredible to think about how far esports has already come without the other help. That's crazy.
I just completely zoned out. It was so crazy that it broke my mind.
Yeah. I mean, and sure, I see what Aduro's saying, talking about so Aduro brings up that there's a huge prize pool and not big for the salary for the league, and
that's also specific to Smite. And like when you look at Worlds, Season 1 Worlds, saying this is a $2.16 million prize pool. First of all, I think it's easier to crowdfund a Worlds prize pool than it is to crowdfund salaries for players.
I agree.
And second of all, dude, like, that's marketing.
Yeah, and it's a plus and a minus, and I think in my perfect world, we'd see more of a salary, but like, then it comes to, well, it's sort of thing like, if I had an esport, it would be nice to like pay the pro players enough to like sustain themselves. Yeah. Until the scene starts sustaining where is that cutoff, blah, blah, and it becomes so like, all I'm saying is I'm very happy. I am a commentator and a content creator for Hi-Rez and not the guy in charge of all that shit. Because like,
big
realistically,
decisions.
yeah, it's big decisions that wind up impacting a lot of people, and you know, there's a lot more involved in esports than just the players or just the casters, because those are the only people you see. You know, there's so much more. Like that guy, the guy who drew the season ticket website, his job depends on pro players existing, right? Like it's, you know, as much as the pro player's job, it requires, well, maybe not that guy to exist, but to a certain extent it does, right? So it's like one hand washes the other, and I think everybody wants to be where League of Legends is right now as far as the sustainability is the wrong word, but like as far as their ecosystem is concerned and how players make money. And that's just so difficult to get to, and we have to get there step by step. So I'm hoping for it. I'm always on it. And like APC said in his twit longer, if you guys didn't see it, I'll link it in a second.
I knew I smelled a transition.
We're always, or we, I don't use the we when we talk about Hi-Rez, but Hi-Rez is always, myself included, is always looking to sort of assist the player, because it's understood that you can't, it's understood that how delicate the situation is. So, I mean, like, it's interesting. It's very, very interesting on how we all have to sort of work together. And that's really what Adam was searching for with the transparency. I mean, as a coach, as a member of a pro team, did this, I mean, so I missed it. Apparently shit got really real this last week.
Yeah, I don't really know what sparked it.
Yeah.
And I think that is like $1 million question. Maybe Shadow Q just started tweeting stuff he had been thinking this whole time. I don't know. But there was, oh, no, you know what? I think it actually happened with the patch notes. So the patch notes was released, and everyone knows the meta right now is a problem. Now, for professional play, I actually think the game is fairly balanced, right? Like, there are like 12 gods I'd say that you probably shouldn't play. You know, like Najah, Mercury, Zeus, etc.
I like Najah.
I still don't think you should play him. I mean, and you can disagree, but like there aren't that many. Right.
Keep going.
So I think it's fairly balanced. The problem is the meta is just kind of ass, because it's like, yo, pick a lot of Guardians, pick a lot of Hunters, maybe you could put, and then like pick whatever solo.
Right.
But it's based around, like, Hunters and Guardians, and so the reason I say balanced is because there's so many options, and you can put people in a lot of different places. The meta just kind of blows. It's very snowbally, it's kind of nasty, and this also goes to what your definition of balance is. Meerkat in chat saying the game is balanced, Gar saying the game isn't, right? Like, I'm just saying you can play a lot of different gods, you can put them in a lot of different places. Yeah. The meta is kind of shitty. Now.
Yeah.
Nobody really likes that, and they want it to change. And part of that is toning down Hunter early game, which Hi-Rez said they were going to do. They released the patch notes, and the changes were, if I remember correctly, 5% attack speed off of Executioner and 50 more gold, 100 more gold on Heartseeker, and 10% attack speed off of Ichabod. Yes. The issue is... No, that's later.
Okay.
And so the issue is that Ichabod isn't actually a Hunter item. It's an anti-Hunter item that other Hunters happen to pick up to play against Hunters.
Right.
So you then nerfed anti-Hunter characters. And that sucks. Now, that change has been reverted. And the 10% attack speed is now on Aussie, which I think is a little bit better. But, you know, Sprint's still a problem. And people are salty. And so what happens is there's, like, this balance meeting where pro players talk to Hi-Rez people. And they're like, hey, man... like, here's what we think need to be changed, and Hi-Rez didn't do that. And so pro players are like, what the fuck, man? Why would you nerf Ichabod? I think the tweet that most resounded with me, that, like, said it right, was, Zalias. I don't think I can express how pissed I am that auto-attack assassins got nerfed and solo hunters got buffed. I don't understand how, why, what.
Right.
And that is, like, perfectly said what everyone was thinking.
Yeah.
Adonis ended up responding, saying, like, pros who've had this line to the balance team, blah, blah, blah. Probably not the best idea in terms of, like, publicity and whatever, but let's not talk about that. The better discussion is, like, well, a lot of players have done those, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
I think ShadowQ said he did. Pern said he did. Like
Yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
players.
Mm-hmm.
Or in the past, like, I talked to Drybear for quite a few hours between Season 1 and Season 2. Like, a lot of people have given their input.
Right.
But basically, people were kind of upset with him about that, and that might have sparked off the tension. There was another response that I want to mention from Dare to Care, who is in the other room, that was like, if you want us to consult on balance, you have to pay us. And I said consult because that's his direction. That is consulting, right. Which makes sense. On the other hand, if you say, if you want us to give you feedback on balance, you have to pay us, that just makes you an asshole. So it's sort of like, right? It's like consult, fine, at feedback, asshole. Right. So that's what he meant by that. And that totally comes down to interpretation and stuff like that.
And it's so tough because then it becomes like everybody starts to get it. Like, I already hear the engines for everybody's moral high ground starting, because it's sort of like, well, it becomes a chicken and egg. And while it's not a great analogy, bear with me. It's, instead of like which came first, it's a which fuels the other, right? In the sense of like, well, if you're a pro and your job and your income requires, or you're in a perfect world, Smite blows up, it would behoove you to give valuable feedback to make Smite a better game. But on the other hand...
So here's the thing, and I can answer that. Let me answer that directly, because I have a really good answer to that.
But I sound like an asshole until I say the other part.
Yeah, I know, no. But just let me answer it, because it's a really hard argument to respond to, right? We have Anatoly Solo, Dare Jungle, and now Polar Bear Mike support. 3 Guardians is really good for us. Why the fuck would I want the meta to change?
Right.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So like I said, from the, and I'm going to attack what Smug said in a second, but from the non-pro player side, it would behoove pro players whose sustainability depends on Smite to blow up to give good feedback to create a better game, and in the same vein, Smite depends on high-end players and other players to extend their brand, so why don't they, you know what I mean? So it becomes this weird cycle of like, what the fuck, right? It just becomes a what is, like, it becomes a who needs to help each other more, because, and at the end of the day, I think what Smug really said is the truth. There's not 2 teams. I think everybody's sort of...
Yeah.
You ever been in one of those conversations, Krett, where it quickly turns into an argument and you realize...
It's not really an argument.
You're both just yelling really loudly about the same shit.
It's not really an argument. There's just a whole bunch of different opinions at the same time. Now, when you start to talk about like the changes that should be made, there are a variety of discussions, right? And there's a lot of things to consider. Like, we're in the middle of a split, and you probably shouldn't remove the Gold Fury. We're in the middle of a split, and it might be even so far to just like make crits not give lifesteal in the middle of the split. That might be too dramatic of a change.
I actually don't like, and I mean, this is the sports guy in me, I don't like change in the middle of the split.
Yeah, totally.
I feel it's incredibly unfair to players, because whether the game is balanced or not is not a part of the conversation that players have when they try to become the best. Mm-hmm. And if you're sitting there for 5 weeks practicing in a meta that you call broken or shitty or garbage or whatever negative adjective you want to use, it's unfair to me to fix it 2 weeks before the end of the season.
And I think
it's just unfair.
That's why I think you can nudge it and not fix it, right? And I think the nudge approach is what's happening right now, which is fine. It just has to be the right nudges, and that's why there was backlash to the Equivol change, which was, I think, easily agreed upon to be not the right item to look at.
Right, exactly. And I mean, one of the big things is I see people asking a little bit more for more PTS, more experimentation, and it's cool because we're seeing that. Mm-hmm. Like, we're seeing all right, we made these changes, it didn't work, let's backpedal a little bit. You're right, Equivol, not the right direction. Aussie, fuck that item, right? Like, there's sort of a give and take. I think right now, and I think APC did a good job in his tweet longer, sort of explaining that, like, you know, it might come off wrong because a caster's job is to provide objective either criticism or praise, right? And when the casters are the most... The casters
and play-by-play.
Right, of course.
Okay.
But I mean, like, the opinions that come out of casters sometimes are negative, and that's okay. But the problem is, that's the only visible line that Hi-Rez has. There is no, like, Hi-Rez Weekly, like Twitch Weekly, right? There's no, like, Hi-Rez Weekly. We have Esports Weekly, but that's more like banter and fun, and here are my picks for the week. There is no, like, State of the Game podcast from Hi-Rez, so...
That would be hilarious. A State of the Game address where Arrows just comes out and, like...
Hello, my fellow Smite players. Like,
oh my god, dude. That would be funny to do once.
That would be fun. I would
only once. Only once. But once.
I'm already envisioning everything. But like, so I think a lot of the pros get the wrong idea, because I'm a caster. Believe it or not, people say negative things about me too.
Shocking.
And people say positive things about me. And you know what? When I read a Reddit thread and it's all like, F-Dot Adonis sounded really good today. F-Dot's play-by-play was great. I love what F-Dot said here. F-Dot had a great analysis point. I don't like the way F-Dot's voice sounds, and I think he's an idiot and doesn't understand the game. Guess which one I remember?
Yeah, totally.
So, knowing that, the players have to have that sort of internalization, right? Like, casters, commentators can say 20,000 good things, and then when a criticism comes, you're going to remember that.
But it's also used, and I know you did it intentionally, but you used a hyperbolic example of criticism, right?
Right.
Like, F-Dot's a shithead, and he doesn't know what he's talking about, is not even remotely constructive.
Right.
And sure, people on the Reddit have said that. And then the other thing is that, like, players certainly don't want to hear something similar, something equivalent from a caster, right?
Right, and I know that this is a touchy subject, but I don't think that any of our casters have been that aggressive.
No. I mean, no one has ever said, like, blah, blah, blah is a shitty player and shouldn't play. Like, that would be really bad.
Right.
Keemstar would, like, just appear out of thin air.
I think it's fine to call a player bad, but
I think it's... specifically, I think specifically bad, right? And so let's just jump right in. I think you could be like, this Zindern is playing bad, or Zindern is playing bad on Thor, but you shouldn't be like, Zindern is bad, because that's probably not true.
Like the whole weak link, I'm not talking about totally, I'm talking about the fact that weak link has been used a lot. That's fair. Whether or not you agree is a different story. But what I'm saying is that a lot of times we can internalize these negative things, and when that's the only, like, Hi-Rez doesn't talk to the pros, like, there's no, like, public show, right, besides the broadcast. The broadcasts are filled with criticism, so it can definitely give the wrong idea. Like, there is a lot of positivity. In fact, it's all positivity. It's just not public, right? Like, when we sit there, we talk about, like, dude, we're all big fans. We sit there and talk about how cool the SPL games were and how awesome the plays were. And you mentioned how good the play was once on the broadcast. You mentioned how poor the misplay was once on the broadcast, and then it's over, right? And then you're going to remember what you're going to remember. So it's hard to, like...
I think part of it
to communicate just
is
how
if
much
you're,
we like.
I think if you're criticizing something, being specific is very important. And so I think weak link is the perfect example of analysis that can be constructive and specific and informative, or it can just be bullshit.
I mean, I'll use mine. DNG just put me out. I call Variety the weak link on Team Dignitas.
Okay, but why?
And to my credit, I usually qualify it.
Yeah, and you have to.
I would say, yeah, Variety has been traditionally the weak link, and I said this actually 2 weeks ago when I called the Dignitas game. I said traditionally, Variety has been the weak link for this Dignitas team because he just hasn't been able to do it. He gets shit on by other soul laners routinely. And then he had that game where he got the double kill before the game started with Uller, and then it became, well, Variety isn't the weak link on this team for this game. He did what he's supposed to do. The team just couldn't keep up. The team couldn't, and that's a different story.
Yeah.
But like Zindern, for the first couple of games on the Night's Watch, was the weak link, unfortunately. Like there is a
but it's also like
situation to say that.
But sometimes, and we've said this during the show, for Zindern, like, we don't know why it's going wrong.
Exactly.
Like, there's something involving Night's Watch and Zindern and the jungle, and it's not working. But we don't know what it is. However, when you're talking about a situation where you do, you should qualify it, because it's better analysis, right? So you should be like, Anatoly is the weak link because he dies way more than everyone else in Smite. But no, it's more like just to use that example, Anatoly is the weak link because, or Anatoly could be seen as the weak link because he's often left alone. Mm-hmm. Because he's often left to fend to himself.
Right.
Fend for himself. And, stuff like that.
I mean, right, exactly. And I mean that, and not even coming from a politically correct, I want people to like me standpoint, I just prefer that. I find that less lazy.
Exactly, yeah, totally.
As a listener, because I mean, I speak for myself here in the fact that like I actually like to be a caster. Coming out of it was David Fry. David Fry in his document wrote like the only people, specifically about Smite casters, was that, you know, the only people that are casters are people that aren't good enough to play the game. There's an old adage that's entirely incorrect. Those who are not smart enough teach, or those who can't teach, right? I have wanted to be a broadcaster since I was like 10.
Yeah, I mean,
I like talking about the game more than I like playing it, to be completely honest.
Also, like, casting requires an entirely different skill set.
Right, it is entirely different. You know how many pros would come up and like just shit the bed, just as much as I would shit the bed in an SPL.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean?
But so it's also like so just to finish up the weak link conversation, we've said that you should probably qualify it, but you should also do something with it, right? You shouldn't just be like Anatoly's weak link, but you should do something like, okay, so how is Eager trying to cover for that, or like how are they playing around that? Or what? But, like, setting up a situation where it's like, Eager doesn't realize this, but Anatoly's weak link is stupid, because we're smarter than that, and you have to give us the credit.
That's the case. Which, for Eager specifically, it's not at all.
I mean, I think that would be very hard to find. Like, I don't think you're going to find a situation where a caster's like, here's the problem with this team that nobody else realizes but me. Or, like, nobody on the team realizes. Because it's your job to analyze the game on screen, and it's their job to be the best team they can, know as much as possible about their own team, and analyze all of their scrims.
Yeah, very, 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 very much so. And I mean, there was a quote. So, going back to what I was saying, I like to be a broadcaster. I try to get better. I follow the Sports Talents Agency of America. Like, not on Twitter. Like, I follow them, and every year they have a summit. Where they talk to, where they invite speakers to come on and such. And this weekend was their 2015 one, and Lisa Visser, I believe her name is a Hall of Fame broadcaster, and she said, if you haven't played pro sports, then it's your job to ask questions, not surmise what should have happened. She goes on to say, I have never once spent a minute in an NFL huddle, and I've never pretended to. I have spent, and she goes on, and I'll paraphrase from here, she spent her life watching football, so she knows a lot of the ins and outs, but she doesn't know 100%. So when she says things criticizing the way players play, it's never 100%. It's always like qualified, and 9 times out of 10, this is what you see. So expect to see this. They didn't do that. I would venture a guess that XYZ is the reason why. Yeah. And like, that's largely what I try to do and sort of try to include, because there has to be some sort of criticism, but in the same vein, there is a respect, because as you said, it's these players' jobs to literally know more than not just the people at home, but the people watching the game. Yeah. So there's a push and pull.
You should it's like if you don't understand someone's build, it's probably not wrong unless you're looking at a character that's very one-dimensional, right? Hunters do auto-attack DPS. Loki kills in a single strike. Those characters are very one-dimensional, so it's very easy to evaluate their builds. If you want to look at a different character build, so Vamana, right? If I'm looking at a Vamana build, what's my basis for evaluation? Am I talking about his DPS over an extended period of time with his ult down? What about with his ult up? Or what if he's just comboing and doing like auto, umbrella ring, armored umbrella, right? Like, that build is going to change in terms of damage and all those things. And then what about the intangibles? What about his ability to stick to his targets or disrupt the enemy team or stay alive? And it's very hard to find a situation where you can objectively analyze a build. But you could maybe say that something is off. For example, my example is Obsidian Shard on Agni. Spear is better. That's objective.
Yes. Spear is mathematically better, and that's important to say.
Yes.
Keep going.
Spear is mathematically better. The only place in which it's not. The only place is when your target is not a mage, so they have like at least 60 protection, or they have more than 45 protections. So they're either a mage with a sovereignty aura on them or someone else, and you're hitting a single bomb, and that's it. Or a single ability, and that's it, with no dot, no nothing else. Then Obsidian Shard is better. But that's like the only situation Spear's better.
Exactly.
You're not gonna find that very often in pro play.
No, I mean, it's and again, it's not about me being I will just call the build wrong if I see a Jotun's Wrath on an amusing cop. I will.
Well, I think you picked a bad example, because he probably is trying to do something with that.
But in what word?
It's very strange. But I think that's where you say it's very strange, because, I mean, he's got it, there's got to be some reason you're going Jotun's Wrath on a Muzen Cobb in the SPL.
I'll give you my actual call.
Yeah.
If I saw Jotun's Wrath built on an AMC in a game, I would say, look, Krett, I mean, a Muzen Cobb is a basic attack-oriented character. He is the most basic attack-oriented character in a classification of characters built around basic attacks.
I would slightly disagree with that.
All right, sweet. It's not like an Anhur or an Uller where their abilities become a very big part of what they do. He's completely built around the basics. So the Jotun's Wrath is actually just wrong. I want to see what makes it right, because from this perspective, I don't see an upside at all.
See, I think the fact that you say I want to see what makes it right is what saves that, but it's also did you consider the combined burst from hitting Swarm simultaneously with Stinger? Because because Swarm is so slow and Stinger is so fast that if you 2-4, they hit simultaneously. Now, with the added pen and with the cooldown reduction, you could maybe just surprise people repeatedly by bursting them for 800. So, maybe there is something behind it, right? And, when you're in the SPL, that's basically it. But even then, this is wrong is so hard to qualify. And when you're looking at a build, it's almost like disproving the existence of God. It's almost like saying, this can't happen. You probably won't do it for the very common ones, and you might be able to do it for, your cousin who lives in the hills and his weird made-up religion. You might be able to prove that God doesn't exist.
Right.
But you're not going to do a great job of it. And specifically, and that's because you're proving a negative. You're saying this doesn't work.
Exactly. And I used such an extreme example, or I tried to pick such an extreme example, I should say, because I am me personally, I am always the one going curious build or strange build, waiting to see where it pays off. And 9 times out of 10, I'll be like, it's really weird to see his Heartseeker built on Vamana, because Vamana tends to be more of a frontline character than a straight damage dealer. So it is really strange to see it built. And then later on, once you see that there's maybe no sprint being built or whatnot, you go, all right, well, the extra movement speed is going to help out, and given that big chunk of you know what I mean? I tend to leave a lot of leeway there.
And I think that's the way to go. There are once again, another example of something that's just wrong. Rage on Circuit. It doesn't work on her 1, so I wouldn't even say just wrong. I think it's this player's opted to build this.
Inefficient.
It's probably they probably made a mistake. They probably weren't aware of this interaction. Because Rage passive does not stack on her one, but maybe it's intentional. There's some value we didn't understand. And I think the perfect example of this, to look at LCS, there was a point where Cop, the AD carry for Curse, accidentally bought a second Infinity Edge, which is Deathbringer.
Right.
Which is bad. But, and so the casters were like, did he buy a second Deathbringer? And they're like, well, maybe it's like blah, blah, blah to get like crit and power in the same items. And they were like, we don't really know. And then after the game, the production guys went in the comms and pulled out him going, oh my god, I bought a second Infinity Edge. Yeah. And then it's just funny and you've got a story. So like, there's just better ways to do it. But I think disagreeing with a player about their build is really weird in a situation where they're not obviously missing something, like Rage on Sir Krett, or honestly, that.
Exactly, like, and you know, in my own defense, that's where I was going with Jotuns on, because you're completely right. The 2 and 4 combo is huge, but wouldn't you rather just have a big power?
Oh yeah, no, that's probably not going to happen. Right, exactly, but like, if someone did it, I would assume that they actually had a and I think maybe it's just the example you picked was so obscure that I would assume by default there was a reason.
Exactly, which is, you know, exactly. And you know, part of that, and I agree with very little of what Dare just said. Dare to Care has been talking about the roles of different casters, and one of the things that I hugely agree with is that calling something bad, calling something wrong, calling something bad, I like a little bit more, but calling something wrong is very lazy and sloppy. Even when it's correct. Like, Rage on Sir Krett, I won't use the term wrong, but I will dress it up, right? I'll see, like,
inefficient.
This is largely inefficient, and it is by no means the...
Maybe even counterproductive.
Right. It's not the... Like, yeah, exactly. Right, but and I mean, as somebody that's casted a lot of games, Krett, you can definitely say that the high tempo of Smite and most MOBAs is similar to hockey in the sense that having a clear divided line between play-by-play and analyst is tough. Sometimes the analyst is going to have to call the play.
Sure. Yeah, totally. I mean, sometimes your, like, play-by-play commentator was just talking about his lunch for, like, a minute because you were filling time, and then a fight starts. And it would be weird for him to talk for another 30 seconds. So your analyst calls it.
Pause. I casted that game, DNJesus. DNJesus in chat brings up, Dagars bought Executioner instead of Jotuns on Hun Bats. I called it incorrect. But I called it incorrect. I said Executioner on Hun Bats is largely not the right play. You want to go because and the reason is because there's such a set in stone build path, right? Heartseeker, maybe not. Boots, Jotuns, Deathbringer, mix and match in whatever order, depending on how far ahead you are, the game, etc. Executioners doesn't fit in that. Hunbats is not a basic attack oriented character. He's going to ability basic. He weaves in basic attacks. He doesn't keep basic attacking enough to get as much use of execution as other players, a la Rage, right? And then post-game interview, Gars was like, yeah, I misclicked. That shit sucked, right? No, it was Meerkat, not Gars. It was Meerkat in the solo lane. So, like, that's a situation where, like, I'll call it incorrect, but only if I have that 100% qualification on it, right? Because I was 100% sure that, like, and part of that conversation also comes from, I know Meerkat knows that god better than that, right? So part of that is also giving respect to the player.
And that's sort of the sort of thing that seems practically incorrect. And so I wrote an article on this, and I'm going to plug myself, on tmeager.com, so you can go check it out. It's a blog, but basically it's like, what makes a good build? And my argument was essentially that builds have a methodology, and that's just a word I'm using. It's, you know, just sort of to do this thing. It's like a goal, it's an idea, it's what you're trying to do.
We've had this conversation.
Hunbots weaves auto attacks, primarily though really doing ability damage and maybe critting somebody because of his passive.
Right.
So an item like Executioner doesn't really fit that methodology. Or like another example is when someone builds Hydra's Lament on Loki and they're like, well, I want to do the most damage possible in a single hit, so I built Hydra's Lament. then I would be like, well, hate to say it, but there is no Hydra's Lament build on Loki that does the most damage on a single hit, right? So
it's a 1-2 hit combo with the ult and then the 3.
Well, no. My point is that you press 1, you press 3, and then you auto attack, and that's like a single hit. It's a single strike, right? But
Right.
Hydra's Lament is an item that seems like it would be good for that. It just turns out that because it doesn't have pen or enough physical power, that it doesn't really work out. So that's a situation where like the methodology of the build doesn't align with the actual build.
Right. Exactly. It's a thought process or whatnot, you know? And
the thought process wants to align with the build, and if it doesn't, then you see something counterproductive, but it's also really hard to say what the thought process is. Loki's pretty obvious. Hunters are pretty obvious.
Yep.
But what the fuck is the thought process behind a Wheelix? Aside from, like, well, they can't really jump. But, like, how do you, like, what does she do? Like, what's her combo? Because she doesn't have just one. You just sort of, like, do a Wheelix things.
Yeah, she's sort of like late-game Najah with a great steroid and tries to combo things. I don't know.
And, like, disrupts a little bit, but, like, you don't go, like, oh, well, Loki does his, like, 1-3 auto attack, or Hunters do, like, autos forever, or Anhur does, like, pillar stun into ult.
And as a commentator, as a caster, as an analyst, whatever the fuck you want to call me, because people in chat, people all over sort of, like, try to make this line. I think they're all weird, close to synonyms. As a talker, I really enjoy gods like Giannis, because I am going to see your methodology and your thought process
in the way you play
on the paper.
Yeah.
Like, not even in the way you play on what you buy. Like, no. You're a Giannis, you buy cooldown boots and Chronos Pendant. I'm going to say you're going to look to help out your team and set things up with portals. You're going to be able to do more of, like, MLC Stealth. You're a burst mage. And it's very obvious, right? You can go different directions. Yeah, you like that. But it's very obvious. And, like, that's fun. And that's and, like, not just from a commentating standpoint, but just from a gameplay standpoint, I enjoy that. When it comes to commentating things like you said, a Wheelix and whatnot, you sort of have to go the route of, you know, there's a couple of different things that a Wheelix does here, looking at the fact that there's a Heartseeker and a 4th item Transcendence. She's just going for huge amounts of physical power, because that passive, 30% of your physical power is huge. So she's going to look to start fights a lot of the time. Yeah. Right? Like, that's sort of what you have to, like, go for, right? There's sort of, and, like, it's fun, but it's definitely challenging.
And then, you know, I'd say the other example where you could, I once again wouldn't use the word wrong, but say a build's counterproductive, is when you see a god that can go two ways, mixing and matching. Maybe Chuck, we'll use an example, right? Like, Chuck can do pretty dope damage with his Thunderstrike and his ult and his Tempest. And sometimes you just auto-attack with him, because you can slow people when you're kind of an asshole and nobody really will bother to peel you. So if you see a Chuck that's going, like, Boots Joden's Rage, which one is it? Right? Is he mixing the two? Like, maybe he's doing that intentionally? I don't know. Or if you see a Chuck that's going, like, all auto attacks, and it's like, well, why isn't he building tank items? I think a lot of I like auto attack chalk, and I like ability chalk. I just don't like auto attack ability chalk. I think auto attack ability chalk is weird. But like that's sort of like my point, is like there's probably a reasoning behind it, and sometimes even if it turns out to be wrong, there's a story there that you can talk about. You could be like, why did the Vamana buy 6 damage items? Well, he thought he was just going to be able to snowball the game with his damage, and then he died. And like,
or he was hoping that the jungle Athena would transition into a late game front line.
Yeah, or whatever.
He was thinking that, like, his hunter sucked, so he needs to do that. Yeah, right?
Or on the other hand, and this came up in a recent game, AFK versus Eager, Weekend played Bull in a Jungle and went Nemean Lion after Boots. Why did he go Nemean Lion after Boots? Well, we interrupted every single hammer spin he ever did, and we just, like, made his life a pain in the ass by CCing him over and over. So he went a defensive item. Now, you could argue that he like maybe Spirit Robe would have been good, and maybe Midgardian Mail would have been good, maybe Mystical Mail would have been good. But like either way, he's telling you what he's doing. He's telling you what he's thinking by buying that item, and that's the point. Is that when pros buy items, they tell you what they're thinking. They might make a mistake in that some build's not as optimal, right? So, like, Serket getting Rage. Well, it doesn't work on her 1, so Rage makes not that much sense. And she doesn't really chain auto attacks because she's not designed. Her precast on her auto attacks is horrible. Like, she's like Popeye. She, like, winds up and then swings. Yeah.
Yeah.
So...
And so I'm going to take that handoff and, like, it's... The pros tell us what they're thinking when they build something. And now, all 553 people in this chat could probably translate that.
To an extent, yeah. I mean, there might be some, like, intricacies that not everyone would understand. Like...
Right, but what I'm saying is that the majority of avid viewers understand it already. The caster's job is to explain it to the other 15,000 of you. Right? And so I use the word translator very intentionally because it's my job to say exactly what we talked about with the Vamana. It's my job to say exactly what we talked about with the Jones Wrath on AMC even, right? Like explore the maybe, tell you it's probably wrong, here's the 1% chance that he's going for something else. Later on, as the game develops, we'll figure something out, right? But just like it's also, and as an avid sports viewer, and just as an avid just individual, right? Avid individual, chill, you know what I mean? We're like, I'm not infallible, and it is my job to understand these things through and through. And I personally, the public perception is that Adonis is the only one that knows what the fuck he's talking about at Hi-Rez because he has 27
he has glasses.
Accounts. He's an ex-pro, 27 platinum accounts. But truth be told, I think that the majority of commentators at Hi-Rez understand the game more than people think, but obviously not at the level of professional players. So I think that more often than not, the things that we try to translate via builds and things of that nature are correct, but when they're wrong, people stick to them. There is not a person out there that would get it 100%. Even other, I don't.
Oh yeah, no, totally.
I don't even think if you took a professional player that understands the level of things at professional player level, that you would get that level of understanding. I mean, like, because there's just a different type of. There's like a different. It's sometimes you just fucking miss, you know.
Sure.
And like as long as the majority of it is there, right? I root for both the players and the commentators because I'm a commentator, but I'm still a fan of the SPL, and I want the commentators to sound good, and I want the players to play well.
So the point is not to judge the builds. You're not like the build arbitrator. That's my fucking job. Exactly. That's my job.
Exactly.
Instead, it's to translate the builds, as you said. But I think the other part of it is that, like, yeah, you cannot translate 100%. Like, and partially, I guess partially it bugs me is like when, and maybe it probably bugs other professional players, coaches, etc. too, is when they see a mistranslation. When someone's like, okay, well, Bastet going for a wheelit or going for Transcendence after Joden's, she's trying to put a lot of physical power into her scalings. Everything up to here has been correct. This is the highest damage option. Well, no, it's not. Pen is higher.
Right.
But then it's like you're also going Transcendence because of the mana to stay on the map a little bit more, etc. And so mistranslations are kind of annoying, but like that's nitpicking, basically. Because what I said was mostly reasonable, and then like the final sentence wasn't really accurate. Like Pen would do more damage. So mistranslations are annoying, but they're going to happen, right? Like, why is this person building this? Well, I could tell you what the items are doing, but I can't tell you what they're thinking. Because I don't know, right? Like, they might be thinking, I want Executioner.
Is it offensive to venture a guess? Like, I know that I've done that. I've
no.
done that, where I go...
It's not offensive to venture a guess, but it is offensive to say what they're thinking when you don't know.
Right. Right. Okay, yeah.
Or not even
Yeah.
offensive. I think offensive is the wrong word. It's just like,
Yeah, sure.
what? Like, it's the sort of thing where pro players like, that's what I wasn't thinking. What? You know?
The level of complication.
Is incredibly high. Like Smite is an incredibly complicated game.
Right.
I remember I was talking to Drybear in season 1, and he was like, "How do we do X without Mercury becoming OP? How do we do Y without Sylvanas becoming OP? Like, introduce a Guardian item. It probably breaks Sylvanas." Right? Like, everything's connected. Everything is interconnected. It's all super complicated. So, obviously, no one can be expected to know everything. And nobody can be expected to get everything right. But it's about translating, not judging. It's about... The default is that the player is right. And you're rarely going to find a situation where a player is making a decision that's just plain wrong, unless they're falling victim to a misconception, right?
Right.
I think a lot of people misconceive that rage does work on Circuit's 1.
Yeah, sure. Right, yeah. And I think that it's just as wrong it is for a caster to say that something is black and white wrong. It's also wrong to say that a caster should not be able to say that. Because in the sense of rage on Circuit, right? Like that
even then though wrong is such an extreme word.
It is. And I don't agree with the usage of the terminology wrong, but the idea, right? You know, and because sometimes it just is, and that is valuable information. You know, when I mean, American football is an incredibly complex sport, nearing the baseball and football are probably the more complex traditional sports, right? And commentators in those games, even like baseball is probably the best example because this actually happens. Where
I think I have a Smite example.
Okay.
Because I fall asleep during your sports examples.
Well, what I'm saying is that in a world where like casting has been like there's an institution of casting, right? Baseball is extremely complex, and without diving into it, certain situations based on amounts of balls and strikes will end players on the field, and skill sets of players, etc. Will dictate what type of pitch, whether it's a fastball, a curveball, a slow ball, a looping ball, a pitcher can throw, right? And sometimes you intentionally break the meta as a pitcher, right? So, you know, like in those situations exist, and the casters will say, like, you know, right here in this situation with XYZ, pitcher does not want to throw a curveball. And then the pitcher throws a curveball, and it works.
Because he wasn't supposed to.
Right. And then the conversation is, well, you know, the reason you did that was...
You're literally talking about meditation bait.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So, like, that sort of conversation, like, you have to acknowledge that something is wrong in order to acknowledge that there is a reason why it might be correct.
Here's a Smite example, right? Team just gets Fire Giant after a team fight. There are no enemy towers up and 3 Phoenixes. None of them have died before, right? The enemy team is respawning fairly soon. The accepted play would be to go kill the right Phoenix, but this team goes to kill the left Phoenix, which is the Phoenix closer to Fire Giant, applying less pressure to map. That would be not the accepted play. 9 times out of 10 times, you try and go for the Phoenix furthest from Fire Giant. But maybe they did it because they felt like they wouldn't kill the Phoenix fast enough and the enemy team would respawn. Right? Like, maybe there's a reason there. Or maybe they just, like, did it, and they weren't really thinking about it.
Right, exactly. And, I mean, that's a situation where, as a commentator, I mean, would you call that out?
I would say, I wonder why they did that, or maybe they did it because of this. But I don't think I would be like, that seemed wrong. Unless, like, they were just, like there, everyone was dead, and they just, like, picked the wrong one.
The terminology of wrong is, I think we've come to a conclusion that the terminology
wrong is wrong, like,
Wrong is wrong. But, but I mean, going forth, like, in that situation, you it's almost doing a disservice to the viewers at home to not mention that is not the normal do, right? Like, you got to learn the rules to break the rules.
Totally.
And in doing so, you know, as they're, like, if I was in that situation, as they're taking down the wrong Phoenix uncontested, I'd be like, look, co-commentator, this is a very peculiar play. They're going to get a Phoenix no matter what. But at this level of play, which Phoenix is very important. And maybe we'll talk to the player after the game, but normally teams go to, and you talk about, like, well, teams go to the Phoenix away from the Fire Giant, because when you get Fire Giant, you go down that lane. And that's when you sort of talk about the analysis, because you got to talk about something when the players are backing. I'm sorry if you want everything to be play-by-play.
Yeah, you totally can't. You got to talk about stuff, yeah.
Right? And so that is that conversation. That's when you have that conversation. So, like, you have to acknowledge that is wrong. Heavy air quotes.
Yeah.
Right? You have to acknowledge that.
Unconventional.
Exactly. Sure. That's probably the word that
I
would use.
So we've talked a lot about the things that are, like, a little bit more not team fighty, right? But I think one of the primary things that commentators like to talk about, because it's fun and entertaining, or, you know, valuable or whatever, let's go with valuable, is what happened in the last team fight. Because every time you have a team, or most of the time when you have a team fight, one team wins and one team loses. At least slightly, right?
Most of the time.
And the losing team probably made mistakes. But how do you talk about that in such a way, like, Agni aggro dashes but dies, right? How do you talk about that without just being like, yo, that Agni just got shit on? Like, how do you do that without being allied?
I mean, I'll tell you exactly how I do it in that situation. You know, again, if the team fight was lost because, and there's a lot of ifs, right? And again, sometimes you have to acknowledge that something is wrong.
Sure.
But it requires a shitload of ifs. Like the executioner on Hun Bat's, there's a shitload of ifs there, right? So, and a shitload of, like, true convention. And I
also think it's important to remember that these ifs are, like, to an extent implied. You're not going to be like, this executioner is wrong if this, if this, if this, if this, if this. You're going to be like, this executioner, not the best bet, blah, blah, blah. And you're not going to, like, you don't completely qualify out everything. Like, part of that is implied. But it's implied by the way you state it.
Exactly. And I think that a lot of what people at home complain about has to do with the fact that the implied things that aren't said, the viewers know that, they like might not credit it being implied, right?
Yeah.
But so when you come into a conversation like the Agni Dash, you know, and it's why a lot of traditional sports commentators get away with saying things are just plain wrong. Somebody brought it up in chat before. The Super Bowl was lost on a wrong play, but it's the same situation. Like it was a Jones on AMC situation where, like, the team has the best, like, the team has the best AoE damage guy in the game, and they chose to single target. Like, that's what happened. It was a pass instead of a run when they were 1 yard away from the field, the end goal, right? So it was, like, egregious. And the coach is a professional coach. Clearly, he does things that you don't know. How dare you criticize this professional coach that made it to the Super Bowl, right? But commentators still fucking did that.
Well,
right?
So the other thing is,
the reasoning is because sports has traditional sports, American football specifically, has such a history. There are 50, 60, 70 some odd years of people playing these games that there is a more defined right and wrong. And when esports comes into play, Smite specifically, we don't have 50 years of people building Deathbringer on Circuit. We don't have 4 decades of Rage Before Deathbringer, right? So that's why wrong is more egregious for esports casters.
Totally.
To say, because there's just no history there.
Well, and also, like, there's a lot of merit to the things that, now, obviously, the Rage Circuit example, it's like, that's just wrong, but, like... Yeah. There's a lot of merit to things. Rage Before Deathbringer, well, if you go Deathbringer first, maybe you're gambling on the 20%, right? Maybe you're doing that. And I think in team fights, just like, casting my mind back through all the drama and all the complaining, I actually don't recall many examples, if any, of players complaining about the way a caster commentated a team fight.
No, and actually
And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that team fights are incredibly complex, mistakes are made that are, like, pretty freaking obvious, and if there's a team that doesn't make mistakes, you're talking about that, because
occasionally you do get that, and
sure,
there is feedback that's listened to, and there's feedback that's laughed at, being very transparent here, and that's the type of
I mean, but that's also inevitable when you're on the internet, right?
Well, I'm talking about,
yeah,
frustrated professionals have been, like, man, like, how dare you call me bad, you're a caster, why don't you play the game at my level, oh wait, you can't, and it's like, you're right, I can't, but you walked into the Hebo ult.
Yeah.
Like, you pressed W into it. There might have been a lot of reasons why.
Yeah.
But you fucked up.
Or like, Kali died without ulting. Like,
right,
it doesn't matter. It does matter why you died without ulting, and that should be explained.
Mm-hmm.
But you died without ulting, and your job is to ult so you don't die without ulting.
Right. Well, I don't like that one, because you can be stunned and...
Oh, yeah, no. But, like, I'm talking about, like, not, like, the perfect, obvious stun lock, right? I'm not talking about, like,
right.
you like, 100 health Kali gets, like, knocked up by Hebo and ulted and is dead. Like, you just got killed by Hebo, which...
Right.
There's probably a way for you to not have been killed by Hebo, and that's another discussion, but I'm talking about, like... You were CC chained or something and, like, you died without ulting. Like, even if it's not a mistake, even if it's just a play that's made by the opponents, that's something that you can talk about. Or maybe someone, like, dashes in on Agni to get the kill, but it's a hunter and they lifesteal enough to survive. That's, like, a miscalculation, misjudged, and it's certainly a mistake, but it's also not the thing where you can be like, wow, that guy sucks because of it. You're like... That's unfortunate for him and really fortunate for the other guy. Happened in a casual I was playing last week where me and like this Najah dove two people, an Anhur and a Sylvanas. And the Sylvanas 2 plus his Lotus Crown plus lifesteal kept the Anhur that had literally 200 health alive. And that's when your caster's like, that's unfortunate. Hope that doesn't happen. I bet Igor hopes that doesn't happen in the next fight, right? Like.
Right.
And I don't think pros are complaining about that. Because that's when it's just like, this is the caster's job. I think pros are complaining about, like... Dare said in chat, like, discrediting a pro player is probably a bad idea. Right? Like, they generally know what they're doing. They generally know what they're talking about. And in a team fight, nobody can play a team fight perfectly every time. Right?
Of course.
It's just impossible. But a pro player can build perfectly, quote-unquote, every time because, like, they know their god.
Right.
I mean, perfectly is subjective because it's a build, and builds are, to an extent, subjective. But that's my point. Like, players are 90% of the time, probably higher, doing their builds right. And in terms of, like, team fights, they're 90% of the time not doing them perfectly right.
So, and I mean, this is shitty because you're obviously one of the more organized teams out there, and you can't speak for all teams. But so I would venture a guess that every single item that is built in an SPL game from your camp has been thought about, and there's a reason behind your build.
No, I'm not the build police. I mean, yes, there is.
I don't mean,
like,
no, I don't mean you specifically. I mean your team.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I fucking hope so. Like, they better be thinking about what they're building, or I'm gonna go beat them up. Like, you don't just randomly build items. Now, maybe there's a situation where, like, you're like, shit, I haven't played this matchup before. Cyclone Spin's running... I don't know what Cyclone Spin is running. Right? And you're just like, well, maybe Wingblade will help here, and it turns out to be wrong. Like, that could happen because...
Right, okay, yeah.
Because it's understandable.
Right, that's sort of what I was at. Yeah, because, I mean, like, if that's the case, then there is no conversation, and every item discussion on broadcast should be just that. It should be the conversation trying to figure out the thought process. But
for the most part, I mean, to an extent, like
that some of the less organized teams than Eager might not do the homework.
Well, sometimes players also have misconceptions, and I'm going to throw Tully under the bus here. Right?
Okay.
At one point, Tully was playing a hunter. He got fairly far ahead. He got to executioner, and he was like, hey, should I build a transcendence here because I'm really far ahead and I want to keep my damage rolling? And it's like, well, no. And that's a misconception, right? He assumed, or he thought that transcendence was this really good damage item, but the way it actually works, rage is much better in that situation. And, like, that could happen, but you give the pro the benefit of the doubt there, right? You're like, well, he wanted Transcendence to keep his mana pool up and to add more power to his abilities, even though it's probably not accurate, or probably not the right item.
Right. Yeah, I mean, sure. So I agree, and I'm sorry, I'm sorry for that, but no, I do agree. You do have to give the benefit of the doubt, but there is the conversation about how you, like I said, I think it's just as important for a commentator to talk about the amazing
Pentakill, Vamana Pentakill.
Too easy. I'm talking items. It's just as important for the commentator to talk about how amazing the Gem of Isolation on Zhang Kui pickup was because of the ultimate, as it is for the commentator to talk about how poor we've killed Rage and Circuit example, right? Like, it's just that important. So, I mean, that conversation of Transcendence versus Pen, that's important. That is a cool tidbit. I mean, that's the conversation of, I mean, again, the only reason I keep bringing it back to sports is because sports has 100 years of broadcasting behind it, which is more what I'm trying to talk about than the sports. Totally. Like when a basketball player takes a mid-range like that, either you slam dunk it or you 3-point shot it, right? Taking a 2-point shot in the middle of everything kind of sucks for obvious reasons. It's important for that broadcaster to say that. Just as important as it is for him to talk about that a 3-point is more than 2 points. Just as, you know what I mean? So you do have to mention that there are negatives, but specific example, there is one player in the NBA that defies all of the numbers and shoots that mid-range jumper absorbently well. Josh Smith is the only player that does it. And every single time he hits that shot, or every game where he hits that shot, that's the soundbite that comes out. You know, the mid-range jumper is the absolute worst shot in basketball, Joey Bones. But, you know, taking a look at Josh Smith, he shoots 98% of it. It's wrong, but for him, it's right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, that conversation has to happen in Smite, too. So it's fun. Your Tully example is a great one. Like, Transcendence is the wrong do. But for him at this moment, it gave him the raw power instead of the penetration. And that's exactly what
I said, Tully, what the fuck are you building? And then he built Rage. But, like, in that situation, even when, like, the pro player's coach or the pro player's teammates would be like, dude, what the fuck are you building? You still, as a commentator, have to give them the benefit of the doubt. And not even, like, looking at the sports comparison, if only because Twitch chat is bad enough as it is. like they're already calling you a shitter no matter what you do. We don't need to have fuel to the fire.
Oh yeah, that's also very, very true. And for what it's worth, recently I have been I've been watching sports on a website with a chat room.
Oh god, it sounds awful.
It's
just as bad.
It's hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's like LeBron James is overpowered. No, he's not. You're a fucking idiot. Yes, he is. You're an idiot. This caster doesn't know what he's talking about. Does this caster understand the game of basketball? Oh my god, I could do better than him. Resident Sleeper, Chris Webber sucks dick. Like, it's the same chat. Like, it's
totally
the same chat. And I think what's important to get looking at Twitch chat is that Twitch chat is A, vocal minority, and B, Twitch chat is the most informed of the informed. So when a caster misses something, they're going to catch it. And you know what? That's the thing. Not everybody is going to catch it. But when you have 15,000 people in a chat, somebody's going to catch it. When a pro player makes a mistake, one of those 15,000 people are going to catch it. You know what I mean? So you're like, it's such a small window of the actual Smite fan. I have met tons of Smite fans in real life, whether it's at Smite events or otherwise. And none of them ever come up to me saying, like, fuck this player, fuck this caster. You know what they say? They say, like, dude, the SPL's really cool. I love all these casters. I love all these players. It's so much fun. I love watching Dare to... Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the general average viewer. It's just this, like, real small percentage of people that are telling you to get shit on.
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally. They're just loud.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the other thing that I guess I want to touch upon, like, is just the institution of casting as compared to the institution of pro play, right? We talked about it. Now, in basketball, there is certainly an institution of casting. People have been doing it forever. Like, there are things that you do, things that you don't do, and ways that you say it. And in Smite for pro play, that's actually fairly similar, right? There are things that you do, things that you don't do, and ways that you do it. Now, sometimes those things turn out to be wrong. In Season 1, Hunters all built Titan's Bane, and it turned out that was actually pretty bad.
That's wrong.
Unless you're trying to kill towers. And then it was good. It was good for towers, good for phoenixes, bad for players. Casters, on the other hand, man, like, how many SPL casters, or like professional, how many casters get paid by Hi-Rez to cast, or have, right? Like 10, 12 maybe?
And that's 12 is, I mean,
that's very generous.
We could do it. I mean, we could, like, me, you, Dry Bear, Lionheart was paid for being, not Lionheart. Lionheart never got paid.
We'll count him. We'll count him.
Okay, we'll count him. So me and you, Dry Bear and Lionheart, DM Brandon, Bart, Hinduman, Scott.
Zayden casted the land. We gotta throw him in there.
Not Zayden. Kevin? Adonis?
Yeah.
9.
I
think that's it.
Zayden, didn't he cast at the spring split, though?
He might have, but he was there as a friend.
Okay, but, I mean, well, right, let's throw him in there. Because he did Challenger Cup.
Total.
Yeah.
Very, very true. Yes, okay, yeah, he did. 10 total.
Right.
That's
and,
it.
I mean, you could even count Golden Boy, who was on the analyst. I don't want to count analysts or guests.
Exactly.
So, okay.
That's 10, so there really is no, like, long-standing tradition. I mean, like me, like, I always talk about how I'm a student of the game of broadcasting and all this big bullshit. That's not actually bullshit. I have, you know, I have books on it. But that's what I'm saying. All of my books are from sports dudes. All of my, like, I'm in the Sportscasting Talents Agency of America, not the broadcasting or esport. Like, there is no long-standing, and if you want to look at the history of esports broadcasting, frankly, a lot of it is shitty by rules of broadcasting. You have your standout dudes, Day 9, who is honestly he is one of those.
Wait, did you forget Scott?
No, I included Scott.
Oh yeah, you did include Scott. Okay.
So I mean, you know, like, traditional broadcasters that broadcast esports as well as a professional broadcaster that dominates sports, few and far between. I think that Riot has really raised the bar for their LCS, and I think you have to look at Tasteless and Artosis. And outside of that, I don't think that there's a lot of history of people that their jobs just wouldn't be taken by ESPN people.
Well, the other thing that I guess I'm trying to get at is that, and I am not trying to sound like a dick by doing this, but like,
no, go for it.
Smite casting does not have enough professionals to be considered an institution by any means, so constructive criticism for the casters is very much legitimate because there isn't really a standard. The closest thing to a standard is Bart and maybe Lionheart going, yeah, we used to do that. And maybe like Dry Bear too, right? like that's the closest thing we have to standard casting in Smite, and that, you know, that extends to esports in general. Obviously, you know, people also shouldn't do the like casters don't know what the fuck they're talking about, blah blah blah, because that's just dumb, rude, wrong, etc.
Right.
But like I think casting in esports is as fresh as pro play is in esports. And so there have to be significant levels of feedback going to both, much as like feedback on pros builds, as there's the feedback where casters talk about pro builds. Like it's a legitimate conversation. And unless you're talking to Smite Game chat saying, shut the fuck up, you don't know what you're talking about, is wrong, because while there are very experienced casters in Smite, it's not an institutional levels of experience.
Right, and I mean, I think, there is a lot of...
I mean, I think that's just a conversation about esports in general that maybe we could cover in another show. Like, it's kind of made up.
Yes, and I mean, I already have notes for next show, and that's getting included in it. But I mean, I speak for myself, and I think it's really important that I speak for myself. Scott Gandhi has decades of, decades is pushing it, but years and years of casting under his belt. It's a different scene, a different culture, and a different game.
Sure.
And you know us here on Really, I'm not going to ban you or time you out, but I implore you to be nice, because our conversation for the next couple of minutes is going to include casters that people have positive and negative feelings about.
Sure, we're civil people. Right. Because we're people.
Scott has an incredibly impressive catalog of casting behind him, right? And Bart has done it as well. A lot of the players in the Hi-Rez casting scene have done their things. I am the opposite. I am a dude with a love of sports broadcasting that sort of fell into this, and I've just grinded. So the constructive criticism always hits home. It always is very important. This notebook is one of 3 that I just have in there with and like I said, I'll laugh at you if you just tell me I don't like your voice. I've gotten his voice is
maybe
too
you should
quit.
Maybe you should
apply an effect to your voice. Maybe you should add some reverb.
Point being is that the criticism is not just good, but it's welcome. And like I said, I speak for myself, but I think I could go out on a limb and say that all of the casters at Hi-Rez really want the feedback, and we take the feedback. And just so you know, a lot of people seem to have this thought process. I'll share some transparency with you on that caster feedback that Bart gives out. So Bart shoots a link over to the Reddit, and he says, fill out numerically how you feel, play-by-play, analysis, hosting, screen presence, etc. The reason I can rattle those off very well is because I spend hours looking at them. And then there's short answer sections. And then what happens is the data's looked at, Bart solidifies it, and then sends the casters individual emails with all of the raw data as well as his takeaway. And then we have a face-to-face individual meeting, and then we have follow-up group meetings, and we have these group meetings 3 times a week on usual, for 3 times when we get the feedback. And every week we have a caster meeting talk about the feedback that we've gotten. So the feedback is not ignored. For a lot of people seem to think it's ignored. No. So and football guy 60, I'll address what you say. DM says he doesn't pay any attention to feedback. DM doesn't pay attention to feedback like I don't pay attention to feedback. The majority of feedback, when you're reading these things, you'll see something legit where I do think I'm a better analyst than people give me credit for, but I know where my strengths lie. I'm a realist, and I understand that my play-by-play scores should be higher than my analytical scores.
Sure.
Right? So you read somebody's, and it's all right, I see it. And then the constructive criticism is F. stutters too much, F. goes on tangents, F. doesn't understand the math. And you're I understand the math, but these other 2, sure. And I'll think about that 3rd one, because maybe I have to think about it some more. And then you have some fuckboy that fills ones out and says, F. sounds like a douchebag from New York. I don't know why. I just don't like him. I would prefer it if Dry Bear would come back. That's like actual feedback that I've gotten. Guess what? Me and DM Brand are going to ignore that. Like,
oh yeah, because it's not constructive. And to I think Mercatus 2.0 said it in chat. Like, you should expect horrible criticism if you're a pro or a caster, if you can't change professions. You should expect Smite Game chat to say horrible things, because that's groupthink. That's like a bunch of people typing in caps being assholes. And you should ignore them, because they're just a bunch of 14-year-olds named Melvin who can't get laid, and they're mad at you. Melvin's a prick. And there's like one guy in chat whose name is Melvin, who's like, oh, I'm sorry. And you should ignore them, because their opinion doesn't matter. However, you should expect constructive criticism from the people. You should expect constructive criticism. You should have people who say, I think you could do this better, here's why, or I didn't like when you did this, here's why, because that's valuable. And
exactly,
you know, we touched upon it a little bit last week with Shadow, when we were talking about like how pro players to an extent are role models. Like, that's part of it, right? Like, yes, that's a Sky reference. Like, if you do something that someone doesn't agree with and they say, don't do that, you're an asshole, like, what are you doing? Like, they're a prick, ignore them. But if they say, hey man, when you said this, it really hurt my feelings, you should probably think about that.
Yes. And I think that there is a distinct difference between listening to feedback and deciding against it than ignoring it. And I don't think that all feedback, even when delivered correctly, needs to be adhered to.
Totally. It would be impossible, because you're going to get someone that says, oh, you should talk louder, and oh, you should talk quieter, right? Like, that will happen.
Well, I specifically get a lot of feedback, personally, from people saying, not just me, well, me personally, for going off on tangents, but the caster crowd specifically, in general, the casting crowd in general, for talking about non-game related things. That is something that I personally specifically ignore, and I'll tell you why. Or, again, not ignore, but I specifically disagree with it, because in a 40-minute stomp, I'm not going to keep reiterating the score in mind to stomp. Sometimes I'm going to talk about Sayo's plays from 2 years ago, or I'm going to talk about a trip to Waffle House with NQ, right? Like, that's just good broadcasting. And just like, as much as the opinion of these fans that really try hard, and whether it's fans or pros or whoever get the email from or the feedback from, it's valuable information, but not all of it's correct. So there is not every time you send a well thought out, concise, understandably why you would feel that way argument, is it going to be agreed with and adhered to. But it's very rarely, in fact, it's never completely ignored if it's done the right way.
So I think this is also applicable to our earlier conversation about like the state of the game and the meta and changes therein, right? Like, someone could say, hey man, I think it would be really cool if Chin size was buffed to season 1 but not allowed on hunters. Right? And it's like, well, yeah, but does Hi-Rez want to have an item that is a physical item but not allowed on hunters, right? Like, is that a decision they want to make with their game? Maybe not. They haven't done it yet. Or, you know, like it's, feedback is cool, and it's a way to express what people want, but it's also, you have to understand that people also want to do things their own way. Now, part of feedback, and this is the part that I think must suck about being casters, like when people are like, hey, or when a majority or a large group of people say, hey, you're doing this thing, I know you think it's good, but it's not good. That's hard. And you know, that pro players have similar things, like, hey man, I know you think building Transcendence is good, but it's not good, right? Like, fuck.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely. Are you talking about something specific?
No, not really. Well, okay, I mean, I fucking hate Transcendence, so that's why I used it. But yeah, no.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's rough, I guess. It depends on individual flavors as well. If every commentator was exactly the same, shit would be real fucking boring.
Yeah, that's true. It would.
And in general, Tom Ballinger, me, on Hi-Rez, I think that viewership would actually go down if every caster was what everybody wanted. Because I know, me and my brother are avid sports viewers. I will turn on any basketball game. I will watch the bottom 2 teams in the league play if Mike Breen and Jeff Van Gundy are commentating. My best friend Kyle hates Jeff Van Gundy. He just won't watch a game. He watches it on mute. My brother, like, you know what I mean? Everybody's got their own thing. So, like, the conversation of is DM Brandon too opinionated or how he phrases his things isn't what I'm going to have right now. But the fact that he's the opinionated caster, I think, personally, is a good thing rather than us all be vanilla, right? Like,
I will agree that is intrinsically okay.
Exactly.
But I won't agree further than that.
Right. Now the execution is a different conversation, right? But like, I think it's really important to the core of F-Dot's what would you say? The analogy in player.
You're the meme.
Like, God fucking damn it. I'm not a meme! Anyway, I'm like the analogy and like player story guy.
What was it in the Challenger Cup release? It was pop culture references. You're the pop culture references guy.
that was it, right? Like I'm the pop culture reference player history guy. I'm the Brandon's the opinion guy. Gandhi is the hype guy. Hindu Man is the
guy with an
accent
guy.
And guy with the accent, right?
Yeah.
Like he's the banter guy. The guy who's taking
he is
shots
the
at
banter
bros
guy
in lighthearted ways, right? And Bart is sort of like the encompassing guy.
Bart is the esports guy. Bart is like so esports, man. It's amazing.
Right? So it's like having all of those. When I get feedback to me that's like, I just don't like F dot, blah, blah, blah. Like, in a moment of, like, actual honesty, it totally does fucking hurt, even though you look at it like, I understand why you need to say this. But not every commentator is going to be for everyone, and I think that's important. So, I think that there's a right and a wrong way, and as casters, we all need to, like, learn. And by no means am I saying we're perfect. What I'm saying is that the different, like, we should not all be the same.
No, totally. But at the same time, everyone should have a level of respect for pro players, give them the benefit of the doubt. And I honestly, I think the biggest part of it is pro players just want to feel like they're respected, and they want to be given the benefit of the doubt. So when someone builds something weird, it's not wrong, it's weird. When someone...
Right.
And that's... I think that's a big part of it.
I do agree with that. I think that they're also, there's like a happy medium. Pros need to be okay with being spoken negatively about.
Oh yeah, totally.
But casters also need to make sure that that's not the most prominent thing coming out of their mouths.
Well, that it's not negative, right? That it's just like, you can't just not talk about someone missing a hog, right? But you can talk about why they missed hog.
Okay, sure.
Right? Sure. Like if someone misses hog on the fire giant, what happened? Did they accidentally get knocked up by the knockup? Why did they happen? Maybe they were stunned in it, or were they like slightly too far away, or did they get Athena taunted off, or did they mistime their CCMU ultimate? Or did Matty
Pocket just waddle the fuck up and hit F?
Yeah.
We've totally seen that
and
happen,
like,
right?
yeah, and so, like, why did that work? Maybe it was because nobody expected it, or maybe it was just miscommunication. But it's not just that Aurora's a bad player, he missed hog.
Right. And I don't think... But so, at what point, if ever, is that, do you become a poor player? Right? Like, because, I mean, we've discussed how wrong is wrong. And that's a good takeaway from this conversation. But at some point, there has to be, like I said, at some point, where that point is the question.
Yeah.
There has to be a situation where there is just a bad player.
And that has to be demonstrable weaknesses.
Can we talk Sam Shrew?
Okay, so
Last year.
So Sam Shrew's interesting, especially after talking to Aurora, who laned with him, right? And his argument was that, like, Sam Shrew was the worst hunter in the SPL. But he was not a bad hunter.
Right, and I think, and that is a conversation that I think is very, very.
But he went on to justify it, and the reason Sam Shrew's worst, like, his early game was fine, his mid game was fine, but in the team fights, he just couldn't carry the way you wanted a hunter to carry, and like. Okay. That's what makes him overall as a hunter poor. Now, the specifics of it, I think, are something that I'd have to go watch tape to articulate. But...
Oh, Red Foo is also a good example.
All right.
Especially since I called those games. So we'll use Red Foo and Sam Shrew as examples. And here's the qualifier that I hate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know Red Foo too well. But let's pretend like he's a nice dude. Because I actually know Sam Shrew. Sam Shrew's a nice guy.
Sam Shrew's hilarious.
Sam Shrew provided me with one of my
biggest
belly laughs. And I'll tell the story. I'm sure Zapman wouldn't mind. So Zapman's talking, and we're having a little bit of fun. We've all had a couple of drinks, and Zapman, not like mean-spirited, right? Just like good-natured, competitive jostling, right? Like, that's really what this is all about. And Zapman's poking fun of Sam Shrew a little bit, because at this point, they're opposing hunters. Mm-hmm. They're going to fight each other in a land. So Zapman's poking fun at Sam Shrew a little bit and having a good time, like, oh, get wrecked, like, you're so little. And then, like, Sam Shrew just quietly walks away, and then from, like, all the way across the foyer, it's just like, you know what, Zapman? Get shit on. I'm going to wreck you. Or, like, something like that. Yeah. And it was, like, so hilarious. Like, I love that. I like that. So, I like Sam Shrew a lot. I love Sam Shrew. Real cool dude. Not a bad guy by any means. He is a better hunter player than virtually everybody that's not in the SPL.
Mm-hmm.
And none of that needs to ever be said because... And at the same time, he's the worst hunter in the SPL. All of the nice things should not need to be said from a broadcasting perspective.
Sure,
because
totally.
The viewer should understand that every comparison and every qualification and every observation is being made in a world in this box of SPL players.
But it also, and this goes back to right at the very beginning of this segment of our show, it has to be qualified. You have to be like, Sam Shrew is the worst hunter in the SPL because in late game team fights, he just can't carry like the others can.
Right, and I mean like Red Foo. Red Foo just
his mechanics were off.
Yeah, Red Foo's a little bit different. So we'll talk about that in a heartbeat. But like I said, I mean Sam Shrew is a better Smite player than virtually everybody, but like. You don't, like, that qualification is just meaningless talk because the viewer, the player, the commentator need to understand that it's all in this closed space of the SPL.
Yeah, you're talking about the SPL.
Right, and I mean, like, I see this in Smite Game chat all the time. When like, people say Carmelo Anthony, the guy whose jersey I have on my wall, is bad, there's a lot of reasons they say that. Do they think that they can go out and play basketball better than him? Of course the fuck not. But again, in sports, we have this, like, history that you can say things like that, and it's just implied that there's, like, well, Carmelo's a nice guy, and I really like him, and his wife makes really good cupcakes, and he's better than me, but he's a big ball hog in the NBA, right? Like, you don't have to say all that. You just say, well, Carmelo's a ball hog. So I think that it's up to the fans and the pros to acknowledge the fact that, like, that is already said. So when qualifications like Sam Shu's the worst hunter, dude, I don't know. I don't mean he's the worst hunter. I don't mean that some bronze 5 hunter is better than him.
Yeah.
I mean that he's the worst hunter in the SPL, and he'd shit on everyone talking about him, right? But like that sort of stuff has to go without saying. And I think that frankly, I think a lot of fans of the SPL are new fans. They're either not sports fans or new to esports, and so these conversations are new to them.
Yeah.
So,
and I think it just is about
need.
Intelligent, demonstrable, and articulate critique, right?
Right.
Like, if you say he's bad, you want to say he's bad because in late game team fights he isn't up to snuff. You want to be able to go to tape and like show it, and you want to like articulate that well. You want to say it well, not in a way that like he's just bad.
Right. Exactly. And you do want to articulate it well, and that goes to being a good commentator.
Oh yeah, totally.
I don't like what Sulan Smite said. Carmelo is an all-star that is getting paid millions upon millions of dollars a year to ignore what bothers him and still perform. Sam Shu doesn't get paid, or any SPL player isn't getting paid enough to pay rent from Smite and can't be held to the same standard. That I disagree with. You put yourself in the spotlight by being an SPL player, and you are open to criticism, whether it's by commentators or fans alike.
And I
respect the money thing, but I don't think that has anything to do with how people can talk about
I think you also have to respect the money thing to some extent. So, man, Shadow Q tweeted something sarcastically a while ago. I don't remember the exact quote, and I can't be bothered to look it up right now, but it was basically just like, oh, I'm playing well now. Maybe it's because I'm streaming less. Like, you have to respect that a lot of these pro players, to make their money, are essentially working 2 jobs. One of them is playing professionally, and the other one is streaming. In my AMA, a few people have been asked, like, why is Zapman playing Heroes of the Storm on stream? Because he wants to stream it, because he enjoys it, and because that's a completely different job from playing Smite professionally, and it's his business. And you have to respect his business. And if he's getting decent viewership in Heroes, or enough for him, who gives a shit?
Exactly.
Right? Now, and I think going so far as to say, well, on his stream I didn't see him practicing Smite is just fucking rude.
No. And
You practice in scrims. Like,
yes, I agree with you. I don't think that goes against my team.
Oh, like, no, totally.
We all make mistakes.
Gotta respect the hustle.
I've probably said something egregious, and I probably wouldn't want my coworkers to come out publicly, but sure, like, I don't agree with that statement. And that's not what I'm talking about at all.
Yeah, totally. It just,
I'm talking about
like,
in-game.
Is in the same conversation.
Sure, but like talking to that comment, like, I don't care. Like, I care largely that you don't make a lot of money, but when I am looking at a game and either making objective analysis or criticism, which is a part of the job of a commentator, it's not it's not like my number 1, 2, 3, 4 priority, but in my wheelhouse, it's important for me to invoke criticism. I don't care how much you make, because it's just the job to objectively criticize. And in fact, I would be doing it would be horrible if I took that into account. If I criticized Cloud9 harsher than upcoming stars,
that would be like,
because
that'd be a dick
C9
move.
made more money.
Now you
disgusting.
you might use a fine-tooth comb on C9 because they're a stronger team.
But
that's completely different. And that's also relative to their strength as a team, and not the fact that they won Worlds and have esports money.
I will judge. I do this. I will say the same things. I will mention the same mistakes that Fnatic and upcoming stars make, but I will hold Fnatic to a higher standard, not because of their sponsor, not because of their money, not because of their wins, but because they're just a objectively better team than stars, or at least they've proven to be up until this point. So when it comes to money, that is not a situation. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter how much or little you get paid when you're in the spotlight. You are opening yourself up to criticism. Guess what? When Krett and I casted the Challenger Cup and everybody had good and bad things to say, we made less or just as much as the players. So that is and we didn't complain. That's just something that comes with being in the spotlight. Either you make $500 million, 500 or 5. If you're in the spotlight, people are going to criticize you, and you don't have the right to complain about it. We've seen players disappear because they don't like the criticism, and I respect
Well,
that
you don't have the
much
right to
more
complain
than I
about
like.
criticism that's fair. Some criticism is, of course, unfair, or... I don't like the word bias. I think people throw it around too much, but, like, sometimes there's bandwagoning, and bandwagoning is bad. And, maybe it's laziness, maybe it's just, like, not... I think it's just sort of, like, a human thing that people do. Like... I don't know who does it, but since I joined Eager, I just started saying specifically, because Dare says it all the time, and Tully says it all the time, and it pisses me off, but I still say it all the time.
Casters have it with on the table.
Too much damage.
Brings to the table. Brings to the table. Brings to the
My
table.
favorite thing that Hinduman does is he says, is Thor going to turn up to this team fight? And then it'll just go, turn up! Every time.
It's actually one of my favorite stories about that is, because like you know when you're doing the things that bandwagon or whatnot, that's all she wrote.
Yeah.
Wasn't sure if it was me or Bart, because we both say it, and it spread like wildfire.
What a player, what a player.
And production pointed it out. Production pointed it out, and they said, hey, you guys say, and they say that to me with that said. I say that far too much. Still looking for a different word, regardless.
I think that fills a hole in English that is not aforementioned, but like...
Right, because I'll, like, statement A, that said B. But anyway, so the overused shitter phrase, as me and Krett like to call it, was, that's all she wrote. It'd be like, fantastic team fight, great play, what a player, that's all she wrote. Or, Thor goes up, Thor goes down, that's all she wrote. I'll never forget it. Production brought it up. Bart's calling the play. He's just like, all right, there it is. Team A comes out on top. 4-3 is the team fight. That's all she put in the book. And, like, I died.
And that's just sort of like a mechanical thing about and I mean mechanical, like that's a way you cast is that like a lot of the time you just have certain phrases that you use for certain things, and every so often maybe you think of like my favorite example is punctuating a kill. One of my favorites was from a guy I saw casting Tekken at Evo, where like in the middle of a player's combo he didn't have anything interesting to say, so he'd be like low kick, boom boom, lands the upper, and he just used boom boom as filler. Boom, or he'd use it to punctuate a combo, and that's really cool. Or got him, or hits the big ult. But at Worlds, my favorite call ever, or in Season 1, for a Rama ult, Bart just yells, Senpai? Like, when Allied did it. That was an amazing. Right. Yeah. Yep. But my favorite one of all time was Bart at Worlds, and insert ate someone as Ao Kuang, and Bart just goes, no. His other option was apparently Trogdor! But, like, that, I think Num 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 was better. But, like, that's cool, and you think about some of those ahead of time. But got him, or hits the big ult, or whatever, you don't. And eventually you start using it too much.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, like, that's, talking about mechanics, I'm trying to think what, I mean, you could probably tell me my shitter phrase is more than not,
100%.
There you go. That is 100% what he was thinking. That is 100%.
Oh, 110%. You just keep going up.
To be fair, I say 110% because I realize how much I say 100%, and I want to separate the extra good from the good.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's really helpful. Good job, man.
It is actually a thought process. Oh, I knew people were going to bring up the Naja ult. When Gars played Naja recently, 1, 2, 3, licks is all it takes to get to the center of that Tootsie Pop.
One of my favorite ones that I got to do was, it was Naja and Thor were on the same team, and someone went up in a Najal and then came back down and then got Thor ulted and died. And I think I got to do the, man, I forget, what is it, the Space Jam quote?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
On a slam.
Yeah, put him on a slam, whatever, Space Jam. Like, oh my god.
Well, so, see, I think there's a difference. The stuff after the stuff is something, like, that's just one of my sound bites. And I think it's good to have
sound bites are very important.
Right. And, like, it's very important. I mean, like, I do not try to build a brand when I cast. I'm not going to say I'm against that, but it's never something I think about.
Right.
One of my more revered broadcasters, Michael Kay, he is the local broadcaster for the Yankees. And in doing so, he gets to broadcast a lot of, like, milestone moments, either home run records or whatever, because they get a lot of, like, big name players. And one of the questions he does, similar to what you do in AMA almost every Monday, via Twitter. It's actually really cool. And somebody asked him, like, hey, what do you have planned for A-Rod's 660th home run? And he's like, and he said, look, I don't have anything planned. I have, like, a couple of ideas that'll happen, but when it happens, it needs to be organic. And any broadcaster that spends more time, like, trying to figure out what they're going to call for a home run instead of observing and then calling it is thinking about the game in the wrong way. Yeah. You're not the show. You're the, like, and, I'm going to use my terminology. You're the highlighter to the show that is put on by the pros. So, like, when I sit there, like, I didn't sit there and, like, read from my book, the stuff after the stuff is how I'm going to build my brand. That's just, like, it's very true to me. The stuff after the stuff is, I say that a lot when a team fight is won and players go towards an objective. Sure. That's a real simple way to explain that. And so, like, that's cool and fun. Not a shitter phrase. Shitter phrases I use all the time are 100%, or I use brings to the table far too much. But I think everybody does. So, like, there's a big difference between the shitter phrases and like...
The other example, someone in chat saying, I'm tired of hearing unfortunate. Like, the other problem is that we're using a language, and there are only so many words you can say to convey things in the right way. Right? Right. Like, earlier, a lot of our conversation was this awkward... walking around the word wrong, because that's not really what we were looking for. Wrong was the wrong word, right? We're talking about something that, like, doesn't really work out, or is unfortunate, or counterproductive, etc. So, like, to an extent, there are words that you're going to hear more than others because English is a language and it has a limited number of words.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean,
but then to touch on your earlier point...
100% right is exactly what I was about to say.
I fucking hate you. To touch on your earlier point, right, like the nom call from Worlds was a great job to highlight a play, because it also was highlighting God that up until that point we hadn't really seen in competitive play. So when the dragon comes out, it was perfect. Now, that's also not something that Bart probably sat there like, but he probably was like, Ao Kwang's gonna eat somebody. Should I go with Nom 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 or Trogdor? Right? Yeah. Like it's not something you think about or contemplate or stew over like a lot of competitive decisions are. It's just inspiration.
Like, I'll explain the exact thought process, or lack thereof, rather, when I made the Naja call that so many people enjoyed. I love Naja. I've dived into a bazillion times over. But I didn't sit there and go, Naja, when Gar's ult somebody, I'm going to make the Tootsie Pop reference. But it's something that I've just done many times in my head when I'm playing, or I've seen it and been like, a 1, a 2, right? Like, and then when it happened, well, that's what came out of my brain because I said it a lot, right? And I mean, like, for the wrong people that say the wrong things a lot more often, the reason they're not broadcasters is because their Freudian slips might be, and I put heavy air quotes because you're a philosopher, but their Freudian slips might be a little more, like, bad, right? My Freudian slip, like racist or something like that.
Yeah, you definitely don't want that.
Yeah, like my Freudian oops slip was not an oops. It was just like, this is what comes out of my mouth, right? For the non-Jack call. So, I mean, that's the thought process. It's
and that's also like a weird thing about casting, or calls. Calls when you're casting is that it really is like the I guess the mechanics behind it, right, is your brain is you're watching, and your brain is understanding the team fight, and like saying like, this guy did this, he went here, this guy did this, he went there, and it's parsing it. It's like breaking it down and saying what's happening, and then you're somewhat subconsciously picking out what's important and verbalizing it and articulating it. And that is a very complex process that you could not do entirely consciously.
Right.
Like,
Right,
your
right.
brain automates it as you get used to casting. That's why, like, I'll just be watching a game with the boys, and I just start casting, and I'm like, this is awkward.
Yeah, I mean, it even happens. Kelly and I were talking about it as a streamer.
Sure.
Right? Like, I will just sit there, and a lot of times I'll talk to myself, but I'm capable of playing a game in silence. But when, like, when somebody sits down next to me as I'm playing a video game, I just start to, like, be a little more vocal, right? I start to vocalize that, because as a streamer, that's what you do. So it's a little bit like, part of casting is subconscious. Part of it is just like what is wheeling around in your brain, you know? So it's that's why sometimes, and I got a lot of shit for it, and I hated myself for it. Wasn't even that bad, but you're sitting there I'm sitting there looking at a play, and I'm talking about Thor is very aggressive, and then the team starts pushing forward. So I said, Thor is very pushing forward.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things, you've been there. The second you say it, you're like, God, fuck, shit.
Yep.
And like, chat was like, oh my God, fire F. Hire a Hindu man. What the fuck is very pushing forward? And it's like, dude, I made a mistake. Like, that totally sucks.
It totally happens.
And to be honest, it shouldn't happen. Like, it shouldn't.
Well, okay, like, it shouldn't happen. It's your job for it not to happen, but, like, that happens. That's like, sometimes a support is going to hog at 26%, and you can't red hog anymore. Right?
Right.
Like, sometimes you're just like, okay, it's gonna be hoggable, click, and it's not. And you're like, shit!
Yeah.
But if you're a good team, then you've got, like, a jungler with hog, and you... No problem.
Right. You know, so that becomes a little issuistic. I'm gonna make a word up there. I actually like it. I'm gonna use it in the future. Something just made noise.
I'm sorry, that was me.
Was it the doot dot?
I have no idea.
That was really weird. But so there's a little bit of that. But also talking about what we're talking about with calls. There's also pageantry.
Okay, I have no idea what you're talking about. So let's go.
There's also pageantry in casting, and that's sort of what we're talking about with the nom 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 nom. I've gotten some feedback, and again, we don't ignore feedback, but sometimes we make the decision to disagree with it. And sometimes I've gotten the feedback that casters, or not just me, but other casters in general, aren't professional or could be more professional by using the correct ability terminology. And now I don't think that's a majority.
So, like,
opinion.
whoop instead of banish.
Exactly.
But it's called fucking whoop.
Opinion. Right.
The ability, you know? She yells whoop.
Yeah,
whoop!
like, I mean, would you ever cast a game with Artemis? I just quit.
Transgressor's Fate, Vengeful Assault, Suppress the Insolent, and Caledonian Boy.
Caledonian Boy!
I have said Transgressor's Fate before, and Suppress the Insolent is a dope name.
Right,
but you don't actually say Vengeful Assault, or you don't actually say Suppress the Insolent every time it gets a kill. You say hit him with a volley, because it's a volley.
Exactly, and like here comes Artemis. Oh, he's gonna get it. Unleashes the Caledonian Boar on, gets the Transgressor's Fate, and ends it with the Suppress the... Like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean,
no, but you might be like, drops Tusky, lands the trap, suppress the insolent. Like, you might do that.
Right.
But I think that's a rule in general. Like, or not a rule. You're not often going to say every ability name. Part of mixing your game up is using descriptive things to replace the abilities, and that is also a really handy trip for when you don't know the ability names of the new god.
Sun ult from Ho-Yi.
Yeah, dropping suns.
Yep, totally.
Yeah. Or, Thor throws his hammer because he literally throws his hammer, and you know it's his ability that he throws his hammer with.
Right, and it's actually funny. I will always say uses the hammer throw until I'm being analytical. Right, so the call will be like, Thor gets in, hits the Berserker's Barrage, throws the hammer to get out. Now you see, the reason that was a really good play, Krett, was because he saved Mjolnir's attunement for getting out of that. You know what I mean? Because then it sounds a little more.
Yeah.
So like going with
And that's sort of dressing your speech in the right sort of way is the way I would call that, right? It's like it's not only being articulate, but it's using it's using the senses of the word, the connotations of the words to make your viewer feel a certain way. And to convey the difference between play-by-play and analysis.
Right. And now I'm using this to transition into something that PB Mike, or I think it's Polar Bear Mike, was
That is Polar
about.
Bear Mike.
Awesome. First of all, welcome to the SPL. Second of all, you suck. Welcome to... No, I'm just kidding. Great play.
No, but seriously.
You suck.
Mike.
Get used to it.
No, wait, that's my job.
But no, so you talk about bias of casters.
Sure.
And that's where I entered the word, the pageantry, right? But he specifically brought up a caster talking about Brandon. Brandon, before one of the AFK games, was like, get your Volcanias ready, Cyclone. Like, that's part of the pageantry.
I think, yeah.
That is esports.
Totally.
It's one thing to say, like, it's one thing, like, bias is like pornography. I can't define it, but I know when I see it, right? But so it's one thing, because like that's part of the pageantry of the sport. That's part of the like, I'm so excited to be here. Holy shit, right? You have to add like, as long as it's like fair and balanced, right? If all of your fireworks are about one team, and then you're like, and then there's upcoming.
Yeah, I mean, and that's also the nature of pro players, or not pro players, sorry, star players, right? You talk about Zapman and Cyclone Spin because they're the star players, and I guess Barracuda. Well, I mean, I feel like I'm too much of an analyst where like the star player thing becomes weird for me, but I guess Barracuda.
True. Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, like, sure, part of it might not live up to the analytics. I mean, you know, that's Void Boy is the perfect example. People might not follow League of Legends, but like Void Boy was a player on Curse. Curse used to be really good.
I think Barracuda is a really good example too. And the reason I say why is like Barracuda is not a playmaker. He is the guy you talk about from C9. But
yes.
Your face turned off.
Oh. But like no, you're right. Barracuda is one of the players you talk about from Cloud9, and my face did turn off. That's very strange.
Yeah, so anyway, he's like the guy you talk about from Cloud9, but I don't think I would call him the star player, because while Barracuda is instrumental to the way they play, he's very important for team fights, etc., etc., he isn't a playmaker in the same way Cyclone is, in the same way Zapman is, in the same way Gars is.
No, yes, I completely agree with that one. Even a better example than the Void Boy one I was going to go with. And, you know, part of it, now, you also get a lot of people, sometimes you talk about those star players when they're not in the game. Cyclone Spin will come up when two unrelated solo laners pick weird choices, because that's what Cyclone Spin does, and he's one of the stars of the league. So, like, I don't think that's fanboying. That's, like, acknowledging that one of the top 10 players is that video delay.
Yeah. Dude, that's the picture I had of you on my computer.
Oh, my God. Well, the one closed picture.
That's true.
but I mean, so yeah, I mean, like, there's a fine line between fanboying, which I actually hate the term. It's totally fine to be a fan. I mean, even as a caster, it's okay. It's not again, like, I can't stress this enough. I think it's very important to have different styles in our casters. As a caster, I won't ever truly be a fan. I think I give Zapman probably the most credit out of all the pros that I talk about, but I truly believe to be completely even-keeled. On the other hand, Adonis is a huge Moex fan, and I think that's awesome, right? Like, I think that's totally fine, cool, and makes it exciting. And like I said, I wouldn't root for a player like Adonis roots for Moex, but that's fun and exciting, and I'm sure Adonis wouldn't do a multitude of things I would do, which is what makes us a good pairing, and B, good to have in the same like zoo of casters or whatever you want to call it.
Sure,
like it's interesting
just
to be different.
Awkward. It's awkward to bring that like. There's two things that I think a fan does often, right? You get really excited when the person you're a fan of does something, right? And that's cool. But you also expect the person you're a fan of to do things. And like I think that can become awkward with casting. If you're like, well, here Moex is going to beat out this person because blah blah blah. Like that starts to become a little bit weird.
And I'll defend Adonis in this one real quick. I think that he is a fan as a broadcaster should be. Like I don't like.
Yeah, totally. Like there's a way to do it when you're a broadcaster, right?
And I think he does it right. You know,
and it's very much about like enjoying that player, perhaps more than you enjoy other players, but still enjoying other players.
Right, exactly. And so in this conversation about bias, I would never think that Adonis is biased towards any player, Moex included.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So I think that there are different ways to do things. Like Brandon and Bart tend to be very like hype in the left-hand side of your spectator UI, coming to the right side of the map, dressed in the red trunks. You've got Team Eager, right?
Yeah.
He does that sort of like that sort of thing, and then right. And then more boxing. And then you have Brandon, I know it's all semantics. And then you have Brandon with the get your Volcanios ready, you know? And that's like huge pageantry. And then you've got like Adonis doing fandom for Moex, right? And that's fun. But I wouldn't argue that any of this it has anything to do with bias. You know? And I think that's important to discern.
I just feel like if not monitored closely, it can become bias, and that's just part of the caster's job. And the other thing, and this is the awkward part, right? The other thing about bias is it's something that requires feedback, right? It's like the bias isn't seen in how you talk about it; it's how people understand how you're talking about it, which is weird, but that's sort of what matters, right?
Right, and I think Cody Knight puts in something great in chat, which it's an American football thing, but so there was a specific football player who, and I mean, this is part of the ESPNification of sports, where there was one football player that like, holy shit, this guy, RG3, Robert Griffin III, was like, the world just... They could not shut up about him. It's the LeBron James syndrome where, like, I mean, sports fans will talk about how, well, the hockey playoffs are going on, and we are going to check in to see what LeBron James is eating for breakfast today, right? Like, that is too far when the world is about this one player. But I don't really think we're there. I don't think that bias is really a situation. And even when it's during the cast,
when done well, not an issue.
Okay.
But it also has to do with the way that people feel about it, right? Like that's the intrinsic part. It's the intrinsic problem of casting. Not only is it what you say, not only is it how you say it and your content, but it's also how people feel about it.
Sure. And so I don't dude, I'm not calling you a liar.
Right.
But I don't think that it's not you. I'm talking to Polar Bear Mike. I'm not.
Well, I'm not a liar.
I'm
not a liar. I'm not lying.
Are you cool? Are you cool?
Yeah.
You're a liar. You're not that cool.
Yes, I am.
But so, like, I'm not calling Mike a liar or anything. But like, I personally never heard a caster be like, "Get ready. Here's the team fight. Player A is gonna win." Right? I think
that would be very weird.
Yeah, I think that's pretty egregious. I don't think anybody would like do that. If that happened, I would totally agree. And if that does happen, please, 580.
I think it's also like has to. I think it can color the way in which a player breaks down the team fight, and I think this is just sort of like like something that has happened in Smite because it just once again is sort of the way humans work.
There's
right?
no history.
When
right? Yeah.
when you like look at old school Team Dignitas with the best in Shadow Q, and you look at a team fight, you're like, well, Zapman did the thing, and blah 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 blah. But sometimes you're glossing over the fact that Tolly landed a 4-man freeze.
Sure.
Like
Yeah,
I think to an extent this sort of bias can create situations where a caster glosses over something, which is unfortunate. Because part of a caster's job is to give credit where credit is due.
Oh, 100, yeah.
You didn't say percent that time. That was good.
Exactly. I actually caught it.
Yeah, and then it just becomes like a hip hop reference.
Yeah, it's an emoji reference.
There you go.
100.
Yeah.
100.
100.
100. Spending hundreds. But yeah, no. So I mean, like So yeah, that's definitely a thing. That's something that that's something that broadcasters just have to be mindful of. That's comparing broadcasting to pro play is very dangerous, and we shouldn't do it. But I'm going to do it. That's sort of like the homework you do. I know that penetration is better than transcendence, so I'm not going to build it. You know, like I'm going to make sure everybody gets free spread, right? Like that's just the things you go into the game thinking about, like hyping yourself up about. So yeah, you're right. It is about casting everybody with the same light. And for a lot of the things that we do wrong, and you know me, I'm always willing to admit it, I think we do right. I think that a lot of the criticism that Hi-Rez Studios casters get for bias is just plain wrong. I don't think we're really biased at all.
But I mean, I think there's a situation where you can like compare compare one thing to another and be like, and it's important to do because part of the problem with casting is that you're a human and humans have tendencies and things, and I would totally believe that a professional caster who is doing his job to the best of his ability would unknowingly give Heroine more credit than a Duro for the same Spirit Ball on the same shot. Because, like, that just sounds like the kind of thing that a human could do accidentally.
Sure, yeah.
Just because, our casters aren't biased. I'll agree. But everyone has bias. And I think that's what is coming into play here.
Might be a little bit. I think that there's also, I think Heroine is a poor example. And I don't like the phrase, I'm with Mike on this one. Best would have hit that Spirit Ball when Lazarus doesn't. Sure. Unless you're going to follow it up with the best was a mid laner when Lazarus was a jungler, which is, of course, incorrect because Lazarus was a mid laner before he was a jungler. But let's pretend like he wasn't, right?
Yeah.
Then that becomes a conversation to have. You want to talk about... I don't even know a good example, but somebody that's known for a particular play or god.
Sure.
Right, like that's a different situation, you know, like if they're in the match.
So I think an example would be Agilitas, now Titan, if, when Confrey was solo lane, the Mage Rage, right? Like, yeah. I think a commentator casting that game would give more credit to a Spirit Ball Raw ult combo from them than they would to maybe another team because it's Titan's thing. And I think that's legitimate, but if you're just talking about, like, a damn good Spirit Ball, it's important that everyone gets the same level of credit, right? Like, if one team does a play and another team does the exact same play, the response should be pretty similar. Not entirely the same, but pretty similar. What's the core of this conversation? Like, what are we trying to get to? I think, how about you speak for casters and I'll speak for professionals?
I actually think this was a really good conversation. I think we got a lot of stuff out of chat. Basically, I think the biggest takeaway is that wrong is wrong. I'm sorry if you are tired of hearing the word unfortunate or curious. Fuck you, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm going to say it's curious or something because at the bottom of it all, dude, sometimes things are just wrong, but saying it's wrong is also just wrong. So I mean, you gotta phrase it the right way. So if you're tired of hearing that building transcendence on a hunter is curious, tough shit, because I'm never going to say it's good, because it's not.
Right, yeah.
So I think what we've taken away is that wrong is wrong, and to never say it. And that a lot of what pro players are looking for has to do with a conversation rather than a flat, definitive answer.
Totally. And I think for pro players, man, I think it comes down to they're looking for respect, and they want to be given the benefit of the doubt for builds, for plays, whatever. And obviously, I don't think any pro player is arguing that they don't make mistakes or that they shouldn't be criticized for making mistakes. That's the job of analysis. But I think they want that criticism to be intelligent, articulate, and, you know, fair, and give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Like, someone misses a raw ult, it's not that their heart wasn't in it, it's that maybe they were leading for something that didn't actually happen. Right?
Very
like
true.
one of my favorite quotes when I stream and I miss a raw is I go, "Who jukes left?" Right? Because I was aiming for the juke right or whatever. And, you know, the other thing that makes this hard is that casters are people. You know, they're not robots. And so what they say is something that requires a lot of effort and a lot of skill and experience to do. It's probably as hard as playing professionally in different ways. And the other end, the important part is, and this is the real bitch, right? The important part about casting, it's about how you make people feel.
Right.
It's about how you make people feel. It is not objective. There are things that are better to do than other things, but the result is person A feels better or feels good about something, person B doesn't, and the goal is to not have people feeling bad.
Very, very well said. I think, so I think that's a great takeaway from the conversation. I think the actual tangible things are casters should, I don't want to say be more respectful because that implies that we disrespect pros, but I think casters need to be more mindful of how much effort that pros put in. And I think that players need to be more mindful of, one, casters can make mistakes just like the players can, and two,
totally,
they're going to get criticized, and sometimes that criticism might be wrong, and that really sucks. It really does. But as long as it's not personal, I think that sometimes...
And also, like, so this happened between me and Bart on Twitter. Like, people were talking about, like, why Tully built Kronos, or built Purple Pot Kronos, or Purple Pot Ethereal Staff on Kronos. And I explained, like, well, Purple Pot makes Kronos safer early through his increased damage threat, which is certainly not greedy, and Ethereal Staff is just, like, a large chunk of health. And, like, that's our opinion, right? And, like, that's, you know, if what the caster says about the thought process isn't the thought process, that's the sort of thing that I think a caster would want to know.
Exactly. And I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he, like, retweeted you when you, during the
Yeah, he totally did. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's exactly, me and Nantan went at it. Well, went at it is hard. Like, that's like how you and Bart, quote unquote, went at it. I had posted something like, I don't know why the fuck Neith is a first pick. She's not that strong. And, like, not meaning she's not strong, meaning, like, she's not stronger than other first picks. And the conversation that Nantan and I had was like, she's not, but she's ambiguous, which means she's strong, like, right? And so, like, that's the kind of back and forth that as a commentator I fucking love. I want that sort of insight. So yeah, that stuff is really, really cool. I think that casters have to be a little more mindful of the pros and give them a little bit more benefit of the doubt. I think that's a perfect way to phrase it.
And vice versa.
But in the same way, yes, I think that pros need to understand that sometimes casters are going to make mistakes, but also sometimes, like, I think that the commentators, I think the pros need to give the commentators a little bit more credit than they're given, and they also have to be willing to be critiqued is the wrong word, but observed sometimes.
Analyzed,
right? Yeah. I mean, you know, and getting some, like, I mean, yeah, I hate to bring up the specific conversations happening in chat, so I won't, but, like, players need to understand that sometimes they're going to be spoken negatively, and that's unfortunately part of their job. Like, sometimes you'll be the cover story on the back page of the sports about how well you did, and then other times you'll be the cover story of the back page of the sports section because of how poorly you did. And that's just as important for a commentator to talk about as it is the positive, as long as it's done like we covered before. As long as it's done in the right way, talking about the negatives is unfortunately a part of the gig.
Totally.
So I think both sides of this conversation. I'm glad that Adam put out the twit longer that he did. I'm glad that we've sort of had this, but I think that the core of it, in all honesty, I think both sides, both players, commentators, and fans alike have to realize that there's ups and downs to it all. To give credit where credit is due, give a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt, and above all, respect each other.
Oh, yeah.
I think that is the straight-up takeaway.
All right, guys. That's been our show. It's been a pleasure. It's really with F. and Krett. We'll see you again next week, Tuesday at 5. Peace.
Peace!